That's how it's gonna be, a little test tube.
It's most likely to be a highly infectious virus.
Guy steps out of Times Square station, smashes it on the sidewalk.
Welcome to the Zero Net Review, a show dedicated to handcrafted studies of genre fiction. I'm author DC McNeil, and I'm joined once again by returning host Patrick Laverne, a suspicious night janitor at a remote hotel.
Those pills worked fine on me. I don't know what to tell you.
And as always, Darth, a free market investor with suspiciously consistent returns on his stocks.
I've got my book here. I am ready. I've got my pages earmarked.
As do I, yes, digitally, albeit.
Yes.
I was looking at my e-tablet. I was like, how am I going to do today's recording? Just logistically. I figured it out, guys. Don't worry. Hey, yeah, welcome back to our continued study of the post-apocalypse, brought to you by the Zero Indent Patreon subscribers who help make the shows and articles that shape Zero Indent. The crew is back together. We ride once again, fellas. It's the OG squad.
Woo!
We're here to talk about and continue our Mandel mini unit. I'm so excited. This is the first time we've done a book on the show. Something that I've sort of been building us up to with the structure of what we've been doing. Before I say another goddamn word, Patrick, what did you think about the first half of this book? Today we are reading Glass Hotel, and the stopping point is up to the end of chapter 5. So through the end of chapter 5, basically when you get to the page that says part 2, which is page 141 in my EPUB version, that's where you stop. If you want to read along, read up to page 141. Hit pause, comment, like, subscribe. Come back once you read the book up to page 141. Patrick, what did you think of this book? The first half, at least.
Right. It was exactly like Station 11. Like, and you know, like at first when you said this was a sequel, I thought like, I always take these things. First of all, when David
before.
says something's a sequel, yeah. When David said something's a sequel, that you know, like expand your definitions of sequel to the broadest fucking thing you could imagine, and that's probably what he's talking about. Because I remember back in the day as well, you were vehemently arguing that Blade Runner 2049 was not a sequel to Blade Runner, and I still can't wrap my head around that one.
Who remembers why I thought that? But I'm sure it was a really well-reasoned argument.
But yeah, I don't know, just obviously, like, you know, structurally, like the interspersing of stories and like, you know, the back and forth with in terms of time and stuff like that, but also, you know, the feelings of, you know, the painfully banal feelings mixed with, like, you know, very acute feelings of distress and you know, like the sonder quality of like everyone living these rich vibrant lives, at least internally, you know, like they're anguishing over, you know, their decisions as much as any other person in the world, kind of thing. Like, it gives you that quiet, like, contemplative feeling that Station 11 gave me as well, and it's great.
Okay, yeah, Darth.
Pretty similar vibes. I remember that I had put off reading it for a long time because I was so focused on the video that I was currently editing, and I was like, if I start it and it's good, which it probably is because David's recommending it, then I'll get addicted. And yeah, the second I sat down to read, and I couldn't stop until like chapter 3, and then like I immediately messaged and I was like, this is so good, I don't want to stop. But
I think I dragged you as always for failing the method, but to be fair, it's a good enough book that I'm like, actually, I get it.
Yeah, I am only a few pages away from now rereading back through chapter 5. So I've reread through chapter 4.5 so far, and which I kind of want to start doing. I know I've said this before, but now I'm seeing all of the stuff that you don't get until you've already done it one time.
Yeah, this is why. That's why I wanted to separate it into halves, because I feel like it's an impossible book to talk about without knowing where it ends. Like, I don't. It's such a weird book. Yeah, but I definitely I know what you mean.
I want to point out I really appreciate Patrick's explanation of what you consider a sequel, because like the entire time I'm reading it, and I was like, where's the Station 11 stuff? I don't get it. But then like thematically and so much of the stuff I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely Station 11, but it's also not. So his explanation made it make so much more sense to me.
This is not one of those things where I'm doing a bit that's gonna pay off later. I'm not the one saying it's a sequel. Emily St John Mandel is the one saying that, and it won't make.
There's a sub chapter in one of the chapters called Astronaut, and for a second I was like, oh, but no, it wasn't.
And I had actually taken it so far that I was going back and looking, because some of the chapters have like sub-chapter numbers. Like the introduction is numbered like 1 through 8. And then later on something else is numbered like something through something. And then I was going back and looking and like adding them up, and I was like, do any of these add up to like 11? Is there like, are they doing numerology here? But I was like, how does this relate to chapter? Because you had me like obsessed that like there was going to be some relation to Station 11, and so I kept looking for it.
Okay,
all of that, it's still amazing.
Yeah, look, so, I can't say anything direct about that, because when we get to Sea of Tranquility, look, I don't want to spoil anything is all I'm saying, but I promise this will make sense at some point, just not till the next book.
Well, it is kind of concerned with like parallel realities, alternate realities where someone made a different decision kind of thing, so perhaps.
Okay.
There was so much stuff that was like, it was almost paralleling the other book, but like only thematically.
Yeah, like maybe? Structurally, kind of. Yeah.
So
okay.
Put a pin in that. We'll come back to that thought at the end of.
Yeah, we'll circle back when we get to Sea of Tranquility. We'll see how you guys feel then. Look, before we do the summary, I just wanted to call out like a few sort of things about the way to read this book. And if you're not reading along, that's totally fine. Something that is like fundamental to understand about the structure of this story that Pat was alluding to is the story is like a series of, much like Station 11 is, it's a series of kind of vignettes that bounce backwards and forwards through time as characters reflect on their experiences, their personal accountabilities, different aspects of their life. And the beginning of the story is sort of a series of vignettes, slipping in and out of Vincent's perspective, and Paul's perspective. They're sort of half siblings. But the thing that's difficult to explain about this book is sometimes, because of the nature of the way that the flashbacks work, characters can sometimes appear to know or talk about information in the past that there's no possible way they could know if they weren't reflecting on it from the future. But there's no separation of perspective from the past and the present and the future. And so it has this really unique effect of characters at once know the totality of everything they've ever known in their entire life, and are also ignorant in the moment and behaving ignorantly because they don't have access to that full set of information. And it produces this kind of melancholic's probably the wrong word, but the book feels like future nostalgia. It's the best way I can put it, where it's characters being nostalgic for a moment they're currently in, almost, if that makes sense. So that's kind of my pitch for this book. If you haven't read it, that's, yeah.
There are moments which are like quite, I feel like painful as well, because as well as nostalgia, a lot of the characters look back and, there's a little section that, implies that like what they're thinking about is a reverie, like some sort of distant memory. But because they're it's prosaically telling it so like vividly, and there's like a fatalism there as you're reading it, and because like they're so in the moment, but you also realize that they're remembering it with the totality of their experience. There's like if they make bad decisions, there's like nothing they can do about it, kind of thing. And yeah, it's like, and then obviously that goes into the whole, what if I had made this different decision at this time, kind of thing that Vincent thinks about a lot.
Constantly. Yeah. Darth, what were you going to say?
I wanted to make an interesting note about the phrase about being nostalgic about a time that you're currently experiencing, um, because that's not just something that you'll see in like this like sci-fi kind of way where you're the characters remembering the past and that kind of thing. But like my nephews are now old enough that they can appreciate Pokemon cards. So my brother and I just had our first session of opening packs with the kids, which was amazing. And because he and I did that when we were a little older, but roughly that age, right? But while we were doing it, while we're ripping the packs, and I'm thinking to myself, this is awesome, having so much fun, but he's 5 and 7 years old. Is like, they might not care about this in another year. This might be the only time that I ever get to experience with them. So I was literally being nostalgic in the moment, like just like you just described. And I think that happens a lot more in like everyday life, especially on vacations or stuff. Getting to have lunch with someone you haven't seen in a long time, and you're like, this is going to end really soon, so you're already feeling nostalgic about it while you're experiencing it. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I struggle with that a lot because it feels like you're getting in your head too much when that happens, right? But then at the same time, it's like that's part of being present is I don't know. It's like realizing that it's fleeting. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I struggle with that all the time. Where I'm like, this could be the last time this thing happens in a long time, or the last time period. I better enjoy it. But then in the act of thinking that, you're out of the moment. And this book is like a really, like in its totality, I think, is a really good rebuttal to the kind of postmodern perspective on everything, which is like to be cynical first and to always have that like third and second level perspective on reality. This book is a really, I think, good opportunity to be able to reflect on your own life in a way that doesn't feel like you're out of the moment and feels like you're actually in the moment by reflecting on it and participating in that nostalgia. I just think it's like a fundamentally very hopeful novel.
Which is ironic because I was about to give a warning. I was like, there's a lot of drugs and a lot of depression, so and then you're like, it's very hopeful.
Yeah. Listen,
I agree that it is hopeful, but I just another analogy popped into my mind of what you're talking about, Darth, like experiencing nostalgia like in the moment. It's sort of like experience, like if you're at a concert or something and like watching the concert through your phone screen that you're recording it on. But like that's typically associated with more negative stuff, like being out of the moment stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're at a gig, don't film it. Just be at the gig, like, you know what I'm saying? That's
very relevant because there's a chapter that we'll cover today where Vincent is given a camera, and it's a mental health thing.
And let me tell you, you better fucking remember about that camera in 4 weeks' time. Remember that she had a fucking camera, because the first time I read these 3 novels and I got to Sea of Tranquility, I went, huh? There's a bunch of details. I'll try and call them out as we see them without giving anything away, of just like things that are worth like keeping foregrounded as ideas. But yeah, her using the camera to mediate and capture parts of reality is like it's like her being present. It's almost like meditation is the way that the book kind of pitches it, which is, yeah, it's a really good call out, Darth. That I think that she's filming stuff that isn't people, I think, is like the key difference between what Pat is talking about and then what Vincent does, because it's like filming like an event because you're there is different than filming something because it's there, if that makes sense. Yeah, there's like a material difference in quality of those two things. without further ado,
I also do, by the way. Like last year, or not last year, a couple years ago when I like moved out of my apartment, I like just did like a 5-minute video of my apartment as it was, like before I packed everything away, just so I could like sort of like look at it in 5 years time and be a little nostalgic for it.
nice, dude. And was was the center of the frame your copy of Give Up After 3 by DC McNeil?
Oh yeah, of course it was.
Of course, dude. Yeah, of course.
And I was wearing this t-shirt.
This t-shirt, which you can find on underink.press. That's so crazy. Darth, when are we going to be able to buy a Darth t-shirt, by the way? What's the holdout for?
These are friends and family only.
Okay. Okay.
I don't even know if you can still
not podcast acquaintances.
I don't even know if you can still get them because I haven't kept up. Teespring was the name of the company, and then they changed the name to Spring, and then they may have gotten bought out. I have not even kept up.
Capitalism, baby. Listen, we might do a bootleg Darth t-shirt. Who knows? I'll just get Eric to steal one, is what I'll do.
Yeah.
I've learned that Eric will do anything I ask him. Your brother is so willing to fucking do shit for me for this show. Listen, you'll see, but it's really funny how bought in he is to just this whole effort of mine to undermine you as a person, Darth. Your brother seems fully on board. So, which is exciting. Yeah, it's good. Shout out to Eric if you're listening. I know you're not because you're busy taking care of your baby. But anyway, all right. Without further ado, Patrick, when you're ready, putting you on the spot because I can see you're not in the Google Doc. Could we please hear?
No, how do you know that?
No, I'm definitely there. The summary for part 1 of Glass Hotel by Emily St John Mandel. Again, this is reading through chapter 5 up to the beginning of part 2, page 141 in the EPUB. I imagine it's probably slightly different in the print version. Darth, do you know what the page number is in the print version of the beginning of part 2?
It ends on page 105.
105.
So
Okay.
part 2 starts on 106.
There you go. Very good. Well done. Hey, there you go. That's the. There you go. Love it. You should have done the Instagram makeup thing where you get the camera to focus. You put it right close and racks focus. All right, Pat. On your own time, when you're ready, can we please hear the summary?
Paul is recovering from a stint in rehab, trying to get his life together in 2019. At age 23 in 1998, his life has had many false starts. After a doomed attempt to socialize in 1998, Paul gives a trio of band members some bad pills, killing the keyboardist, Charlie. Fleeing consequence and university, Vincent spends New Year's Eve 1999 with his half-sister Vincent in Toronto.
God damn it. That should read Paul. Hold on. Do that again.
After a doomed attempt to socialize in 1998, Paul gives a trio of band members some bad pills, killing the keyboardist, Charlie. Fleeing consequence and university, Paul spends New Year's Eve 1999 with his half-sister Vincent in Toronto. In spring of 2005, Walter is the night manager at Hotel Cayette. Is that how you say it?
I don't know. It's not a real place, so
Yeah.
I'm going with Cayette.
Okay.
Wait, hang on, Doc. You're the
"Why don't-"
American. Is that how you would say it?
No, you're gonna. I don't want to say my pronunciation because you're gonna lose it. But in my brain, and I did not work to figure this out. This is just what my brain did. But I go Cayette. This Hotel
Jesus.
Cayette.
Okay, well, it's Canadian, so it's probably Cayette, but I appreciate your southern charm.
One evening, the words, "Why don't you swallow broken glass?" are painted on the lobby window in neon paste, much to the horror of the guests and the bartender, Vincent. Her half-brother, Paul, works... Wait. Yeah, okay. Her half-brother, Paul, works as the night janitor... Her half-brother Paul works as the night janitor for the hotel and seems fairly miserable all told. The following evening, Leon Provence, a shipping executive facing redundancy, invests with Jonathan Alkaitis, a charming securities trader. Vincent leaves Hotel Cayette to begin a relationship with Jonathan Alkaitis, living in the kingdom of money. Later, Vincent meets the trophy wife of another socialite, Morella. Morella and Vincent fall into a complex sort of friendship, one founded on the fragility of their husband's wealth. In the before, Olivia enters into a relationship with Lucas Alkaitis, a painter. She paints the true Lucas, a heroin addict, before he ODs behind a restaurant on Delany Street. Years later, in the early 2000s, one of Olivia's paintings sells for $200,000. She chooses to invest this money with Lucas's surviving brother, Jonathan Alkaitis.
If you couldn't tell from that summary, this is sort of a tricky book to follow plot-wise, because it does the same thing as Station 11, where it really relies on vibes and sort of flowing you through moment to moment. But I think the big thing that's not in the summary here is that in the future, it seems like something happens with Jonathan. We don't exactly know what, but he is like this investment guy. He's got this business of like investing a bunch of people's money, and there's a reporter who is convinced that his returns are like too consistent. So we can maybe like assume that there are some, allusions to all of the fraud happening in the early 2000s, and that maybe where this is going is like the crash of 2009. He might somehow be involved, right? Like that's kind of the underlying implication of Jonathan as a dude. Now, I'm curious at this stage, before we get into the weeds and what I'm sure is going to be an episode of us just mostly reading the book out loud, is there like a thing that you guys think the story is about at this stage? Like, is there like a salient theme that sticks out as like a, if Station 11 is like fundamentally a story about like ghosts and like the ghosts of trauma that animate us, do you have a good sense for like what Glass Hotel's kind of big thematic idea is at this stage?
No, I think at this point, if it's your first read, I don't know that there's enough to go on yet. I at this point was fully convinced that the entire thing was going to be building up to the death of Vincent's mother, who was Paul's stepmother. I thought that was going to be way more apart than it ended up being. Like, I thought that was the secret main focus of all of it. And I also thought that the words scrawled on the window, "Why don't you eat glass?" I thought that was going to be much more of a deeper, like, literal riddle that led to something much more involved, which then tied back to Vincent's mom. But in the end, none of that actually tied together. But at this point, that was what I was thinking.
It's so so far it's very interested in class and money and the kind of lives you can lead, the kind of different lives you lead in terms of money. And it's that sounds like a simple idea, like, it's a fairly like, it's like whatever, like any and all art could probably do that, but like I think, I don't know, not to this degree, not to the degree that where you hear Vincent's inner monologue about the ennui of going from rags to riches and to the point where money doesn't, hold value to you anymore. It doesn't give you like a spark or anything like that. It is, but I think that's kind of the most profound thing so far that the book is aiming at. It's like, what like the absolute like colossal difference in experience and human experience that money makes in this world is where my head is at.
I think I'll back up my answer because looking through like thinking each chapter is kind of focusing on a person, and all of the people are lost and trying to figure out either like who they are or what they're supposed to do in the world or where they're supposed to be. Um, uh, Paul is going through that when he's at college and he's still trying to make sure he stays off of drugs and doesn't like what he's studying in college, doesn't know what he wants to do. Vincent, like dropping out of school and struggling with her mom's death, doesn't know where she's supposed to be. Um, uh, what's the guy's name? Walter at the hotel. He like I think it was his wife died recently, so he's trying to figure out where he
No,
wants to go. He like interviews.
She left him for a lawyer.
Oh, left for a lawyer. Yeah. And like he had agreed with a friend, I'm not going to make any drastic decisions, but then like a day later he takes a job at the hotel because he thinks that's where he's supposed to be. And then I think it was the same thing with Olivia, where she was kind of like looking for an opportunity because she was so broke, and then one of her paintings got big, and it feels like the point of the first like 5 chapters was trying to find their place in the world, or where they were supposed to be, or what they were supposed to do.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Can I also just throw like a prediction as to like the final outcome of the ideas of this book, and I think it's in the title, Glass Hotel, is that like, you know, it's about people like looking out from, you know, some enclosed space into like a vibrant and, you know, rich life, or I don't know, feeling like they are observers in their own life. Kind of, that's the general vibe of what I feel like this book is going to be about.
It might be the opposite, because the text of when they arrive at the hotel, it specifically describes it as being full of glass, and you could see all of the ornateness of the inside while you're still like on the dock on the outside, you know, on the outside looking in kind of thing, which very much pairs with the themes you were talking about of money and the world of money and all that, of being on the outside looking in at the life that they have.
Mm.
This is the thing that other podcasts don't have a Patrick Laverne who can come in and just be like, yo, this is my shot that I'm calling, and perfectly articulate like this. Emily St John Mandel spent 2 years being like, how the fuck do I articulate this thing? And you're like, got it in one. Yeah, it's about like transparency and transaction, and the way that life kind of, there are these invisible, it feels like it sometimes with life, there are these invisible barriers that we fail to permeate, that we want to permeate, or that we want to be able to glimpse through to like a different potential future or a different potential past. And we don't realize those barriers are there until we've passed through them, right? They're like thresholds that forever change us, that we don't realize are thresholds until we've passed through them. And I think that like the title Glass Hotel is, yeah, exactly what you said, Pat, is alluding to that as an idea. Yeah, let's get in the weeds. Let's really do this damn thing. So, okay, we start with an opening vignette of Vincent. Something's happened. It seems like she's drowning or something. She's flashing through little glimpses of her life, and then we get we kind of get thrust into Paul's perspective as our first big sort of protagonist. Again, I apologize. This is just going to be me reading the whole fucking book, because there is some prose in here that's just so good. The first big bit of characterization we get for Paul is that he is going through, you know, he's been to rehab. It seems like at some point during his past, he lived with Vincent when, like, just after her mom died, and they don't seem to have like a good relationship. He feels obligated to be her brother more than he like wants to care for her. And the first thing we get is Paul sort of navigating this new life that he's found himself with at university. He's clearly an addict, and he is struggling to kind of keep on the up and up. As Darth has already said, he doesn't like what he's studying. And the bit I want to read first is from page 17, where this is Paul thinking about the he's at a gig and he's watching this, he's in like a goth club in the basement, and he's watching this band, and the singer that he quite fancies, and the music's fairly dreadful, but he has like he's like musically inclined, and so this is Paul listening to the music. He says, "It was frankly discordant, the voice with the keyboard notes and the bursts of static. But then the girl raised her violin, and this turned out to be the missing element. When she drew her bow, the note was like a bridge between islands of static. And Paul could hear how it all fit together, the violin and the static and the shadowy underpinning of the bass guitar. It was briefly thrilling. Then the girl lowered her violin, and the music fell apart into its disparate components, and Paul found himself wondering once again how anyone listened to this stuff." And if you need a better primer for a character, that is Paul in a nutshell. He has these glimpses of like absolute clarity through the chaos, and then it just falls apart in front of him every single time. I know I said this during Station 11, but Emily St John Mandel can do the damn thing, guys. She can write a fucking book, and this kind of thing is, I could never. Like, I aspire to this kind of stuff. It's such a good summation of his entire character in like 4 sentences.
I was waiting to bring up that exact passage because I think that is not just Paul. I think that is specifically written to sum up like the entire theme or one of the themes of the entire book. Because the way that it describes it is that the violin is what the music was searching for to make the music whole. And so that's the same thing that we just said with all of these characters are trying to find the thing or the place or the job or the person that makes them whole. So the violin coming into the music is like Al-Qaeda's coming in to Vincent's life and her appreciating that, and later on her working on the boat was her violin. And Paul finding his music later on in life, that was the violin coming into his life. And then once you lose focus, once that violin drops out of the music is discordant again, meaning their lives are discordant again. So I was blown away when I reread it, and I was like, that passage is way deeper. It describes like the entire book, like all the characters in there.
I think the crucial detail is that it's necessarily temporary, right? Like, it's that you can bring all these discordant pieces into harmony, but it's always going to end. And then you have to find the next. Like, it's about these cycles of harmony and discord, and like how you find. The word discord is so poison now. Every time I say it my brain does a wrong thing because I keep thinking about that. But like, yeah, it's like cycles of harmony and discord, and that like both are temporary. And the big thing that this book sort of seems to point toward is like, it's that the aphorism of like, this too shall pass, right? The good stuff will pass, the bad stuff will pass, and you move through it, and you have to appreciate what you have when you have it as much as you can. I think that's like a big output of that as an idea.
And it's interesting because musically, it's usually done in the opposite fashion, where you'll have something that's really really beautiful, where there's not these discordant tones, and then they'll introduce those moments where it's like, there's a flat or a sharp thrown in there, and it gives you this twang, and you're like, oh, that doesn't sound right, but then it resolves and it leads you to a new key, or it builds up to something. Usually that's what those off notes do. But here she wrote it where the main music is off, and the good sounding music is the stuff that's leading you back to the bad stuff. I don't know. It's really interesting.
I think there's possibly also another meaning in that, like, he thinks that everything resolves and comes together from like the person he's hot on. Like, because he already likes this girl, right? And that's why he's like there, and it's why he's like looking up at her and listening. And as soon as her part comes in, he's like, oh, she brings it all, she ties it all together. She's brilliant. Kind of like, and I feel like
that's just like guys, right?
Exactly. But I think it's true for every character in this book, where like they're kind of waiting for the right person to step into their life, like a fairy tale, and like fix everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, yeah. Go on.
No, I was just gonna give you the sort of flippant way that Paul views this, which is he goes, whatever they were doing on stage sounded less like music than like some kind of malfunctioning radio or weird bursts of static and disconnected notes. The kind of scattered ambient electronica that Paul, as a lifelong Beethoven fanatic, absolutely did not get. But the girl was beautiful, so he didn't mind at all. If he wasn't enjoying the music, he could at least enjoy watching her.
Yeah. And then there's Emily St. John is really good at like raw real life moments and bits of characterization. I like the bit where he goes up to her afterwards and he says hi, and then she describes her reaction as like, she says hi back in the guarded way that all pretty girls do when they know that why someone's approaching them, kind of thing. And I was like, damn, that's too real.
That's too real, man. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And he does this thing where he tries not to pay attention to her, and then like finds out a way. He's like, oh, like, because he knows that she thinks he's gonna ask her out, and so he instead is like, oh, are there any like good spots for like good music in this town, or like dancing? And so they tell him like, oh, like you got to go to this place on Tuesday night. Yeah, and it's really uncomfortable because it's the realest shit ever, where everyone knows where this is going, but Paul is putting on this performance anyway. It's so good. Yeah. It really captures like a fraught, slightly tortured, mundane thing that happens every day, you know?
That's what I meant at the beginning when I was describing it as painfully banal. Like, it's not really dramatic, but like it's, I don't know, it's just these little awkward moments in real life that, like, you know, make up life, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was practically yelling at her. I was like, put down the mirror. I don't need to be like reading about myself.
I definitely felt that with later on when Paul, like, he's had the pill and he realizes they're bad pills, and he gives them he bumps into them again at the bar that they suggest system, and he gives him the pills, and like the whole time you can feel Paul thinking this is a bad idea, and you're reading it being like, Paul, this is a bad idea, don't do this. And then he does it anyway because he's trying to be cool. And then he asks her out and she says no anyway, and I'm like, Paul, my brother, what are we doing? It's it paints such a Paul is such a tragic figure in that it seems like he's a guy who, he's a bit like Jeevan in some aspects, where he seems like a guy who keeps trying to start his life, and every start is a false start. And he just has to keep fleeing from like bad decision to bad decision. But like, granted, Charlie is a pretty big like consequence, but it seems like outside of that, the rest of his life, the consequences have been kind of small and like not that dramatic, but they force him to like flee anyway. And I think that's like part of what really defines this book, in maybe contrast or like, you know, complementary fashion to Station 11, which is the consequences here are like so mundane that they kind of wrap back around to being existential and important. Like, it's like that they are so mundane makes them come across as really significant because they're significant to the people experiencing them. Whereas like Station 11, it's like the consequences are like literally world ending for some of these characters and like life ending for some of these characters, by contrast. And so I just think there's like an interesting sort of friction that putting these two texts next to each other produces, which is they make each story feel much more important than it did previously by being next to each other, because they both point out how important the mundane is, but the mundane is in such different contexts. if that makes sense. Like it's sort of it's exploring a lot of the same ideas, but through these different vectors that produce more meaning for each other. And I'm sure when we sort of read the three together, we'll have, you know, bigger thoughts there. But yeah, Paul in particular is a character who he feels like a, you know, you could easily see Jeevan being in these types of moments in these types of rooms and making these types of choices. Yeah. She's just really good at writing losers that don't feel like losers.
Something that just hit me about the way that she the way that it was written, where he goes up and says hi to Annika, and it says like she smiles at him in a way that knows that he's probably going to ask her out, and she's tired of that, which is exactly why he was there and what he was going to do, right? So like the text like says, you know, this is what she doesn't want, but I'm going to do it anyway. And it just made me think that I think that there's definitely a theme of like fate running throughout the entire book, especially how it starts and then how it ends. And then looking at like look where Paul starts and then look at where he ends. And I think that same thing could be said about probably several characters in here, that like they were trying to get away from something or to find something, and then by the end of it, fate was like, no, it doesn't matter. You know, you had to ask her out even though it wasn't going to work, or you had to try to get off drugs even though it wasn't going to work. And I don't know, I don't really know how much fate ties into the other themes, but that just struck me.
Yeah, I think you could. I think you could read it the other way, which is like that it's all random and it's all chaos, and the thing that's happening is these people are doomed to be themselves, right? Like I think if you view it as like a tragedy, it's Paul senses in some aspect that she's tired of being asked out like this, but he actually can't help himself, and it like in the same way that he can't help himself, you know, give them the pills when he bumps into them because he's still trying to impress her. He can't help himself when he paints the, you know, why don't you swallow broken glass in the hotel window? Like, there's a, these characters are kind of like doomed to be themselves and they can never escape being themselves. And like, that is what produces that sense of fate, is like, they were always going to do this thing, even though that they know that it's maybe not the right thing or it's the wrong thing. You know, Mandel, I think, is like very interested in what makes us who we are and the ways that we constantly try to change that and fail, right? And Mandel is as a person, not to visit her personal life too much, but you know, she, like a lot of us, went through the pandemic and came out of the other side of that and realized that some of the large constituent parts of her life she wanted to change. You know, she gets a divorce pretty much right after lockdown. She, you know, begins a relationship with a woman, and completely reshapes her life around being like a full-time author. And I think that she is someone who wants to write about these characters who seem unable to change their lives or indeed their fate, to use your term there, Darth. And I would keep the idea of fate in the back of your head as we work through her, you know, the next sort of half of this book and the final part of this 3-book corpus, because I think that she's also interested in like what fate might actually mean practically. Like if there is such a thing, what does that mean to contend with the concept that your life is always going to go this way? And at what point do we have the ability to intervene on that? And what point do we not have the ability to intervene on that? You know.
Well, I think it's exactly what the characters are trying to do constantly, is intervene in fate. Like what you're saying, Darth, like he asks her out even though he knows what the answer is going to be. Like he just shoots a shot anyway because, you know, it's a chance to prove fate wrong in a sense. He wants a different outcome.
Yeah, and Vincent especially, she like literally talks about this, or her thought process is in the book, about how she chose this life with Al-Qaeda, and she imagines all of the different lives that she could have had, but she was like, I chose this destiny, and this is like the easier route, and I'm enjoying this easier route. And she's thinking a lot about fate and how she directly chose her own fate. But then other characters like Paul seem like they did not choose their own fate, or incapable of choosing it, or incapable of seeing the possibility. Actually, the investor, Xavier, he talks about, he's a music producer, and he and his wife are having dinner with Vincent and Al-Qaeda, and he's talking about this singer that he used to know, who was ironically the same girl that Paul was crushing on in these early chapters, and he's talking about how she had this amazing fate laid out in front of her of being an incredibly musician that was, hugely popular, because they were going to make her that, and she did not want, she saw the fate, but she did not want to choose it. She chose something different. So yeah, like y'all are saying, the theme of them choosing what fate they want to have, or being incapable of choosing, is a huge part of it. And the phrase "doomed to be yourself" is that hits hard.
Yeah, sorry. It's also, I love that conversation with that producer, because he's such a fucking, he's the worst.
He's insufferable, dude. He's the worst.
God, he's like,
so
yeah,
shitty.
man. She didn't realize that she was 20 and she was hot, and that was like her last stop. And you're like, dude, come on. He sucks
He's
so
such a
bad.
douche.
It's like,
Also, can I was following I was following everything quite well, like in the book. I didn't realize that he was talking about that chick though. He was talking about the girl that Paul was hitting on.
yeah, Annika.
Yeah, and it was just because they only named so many people. There's only so many named characters, and on this second read through, when I got to Annika, and I was like, oh, I know that name. And then he specifically calls out the violin too. So,
Which he thinks is weird. He's like, that's fucking worthless, but like, yeah, it is. I would say it's not plot relevant. It's just, I don't know. Mandel does this a lot. It's just like cute.
She also transitions to Olivia from Vincent and Morella walking.
Oh, dude, it's so cool. And you don't get the walking past bit till the end of that chapter. It's so cool. And I'm like, oh, that's, yeah, it's that, we talked about it with Station 11, the structuring principle of the novel being emotion, not like cause and effect. That's like a really good example of that.
something that just hit me is, how he said, the Xavier said that the violin was the most useless thing, which is directly the opposite of Paul. Was like, the violin is the music, right? That's what ties it all together. But the producer was like, no, it's the worst part of it. Like, that's not the music.
Okay, I see you cooking over there, Emily. I see what's going on. I didn't notice that. That's fucking cool, man. Yeah. Okay, we've been talking for an hour. We're up to page 20. So, listen, the structuring idea of this book is basically there's a hotel, and the hotel it's like this big, elaborate, fancy glass hotel, obviously, in Cayette, which is like a remote, it's like an insular, like it's not even like a spit, like it's just this like tiny little strip of houses, like in the Canadian wilderness. And we get our first glimpse of this through Vincent's perspective as a kid. Something I should say, we were talking about this in Station 11, and you guys looked at me like I was crazy. So in the books, Cayette is where Miranda and Arthur are also from.
Miranda. Okay. Oh, okay. Wait, Miranda and Arthur from the same place?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're both from Cayette. So that's the big connective tissue with, at least like nominally, that's a big connective piece of tissue with Station 11. is that two of the main characters are from the same place as Vincent.
Is Kayet meant to be in or around Lake Ontario?
It's not. It's based on fuck, I don't know how you say this. Quatsino? Quatsano? It's like north of Vancouver Island.
Watching David try to pronounce words he doesn't know how to pronounce.
Quatsino? I don't know, dude. It's like north of Vancouver Island, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, but similar vibe, like Great Lakes vibes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so nominally the idea is that like the whole of this corpus sort of centers around this one geographical location in some way or another. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Seven City, this is the lake that presumably Jeevan crosses, etc. and so forth. Yeah. Okay, let me give you our first glimpse of Kayet, because I think like the description is probably relevant. So this is Vincent and Paul catching the bus home from school just after Vincent has vandalized the school property with the words "sweep me up," which he just thinks is like really poetic. And it's really funny because Paul catches her doing it. And he's like, "Why did you do that?" She's like, "I don't know. I just like the phrase." Like it's very kid brain stuff where it's like, yeah, it just felt like a good thing to do. This is our first proper look at it. This is on page 30 of the EPUB. They rode the bus in silence back to Grace Harbor, where the mailboat waited to take them to Kayet. The boat careered around the peninsula, and Paul stared at the massive construction site where the new hotel was going up, at the clouds at the back of Melissa's head, at the trees on the shore, anything to avoid looking into the depths of the water. Nothing he wanted to think about down there. When he glanced at Vincent, he was relieved to see that she wasn't looking at the water either. She was looking at the darkening sky. On the far side of the peninsula was Kayet, this place that made Port Hardy look like a metropolis in comparison. 21 houses pinned between the water and the forest. The total local infrastructure consisting of a road with 2 dead ends, a small church from the 1850s, a one-room post office, a shuttered one-room elementary school. There hadn't been enough children to keep the school open since the 80s, and a single pier. When the boat docked at Kayet, they walked up the hill to the house and found Dad and Grandma waiting at the kitchen table. But like, that's how small this place is. There's nothing going on. It's like 20 houses and a church and one strip of road. You know what I mean? Yeah, you start going north. Yeah. If basically everything between like Brisbane and Mount Isa is that, more or less.
Yeah.
I guess that could tie into the theme of the like so much of the theme, like y'all said earlier, is looking into the world of money, and that place is the exact opposite of the world of money. Except when the hotel is added in there, then that is now a retreat, which you have to be in the world of money to stay at, which is interesting.
Yeah, definitely. It's sort of a like, I mean, I think to Pat's point earlier, like it's a real, like she's thinking really deeply about like class, where this is like an effort for the bourgeoisie. Here I go again talking about socialism. This is you know the bourgeoisie taking an element of poverty and an element of the real and gentrifying that in service of like the ultra wealthy, right? They are taking the aesthetics. You even get a conversation later where you have these characters thinking about like what this hotel means, and we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, Kayet is like fundamentally a place where you escape from. Like it's a place where you leave. You don't stay there if you can help it. And you know we see that with Paul and Vincent, and obviously in Station 11 we have that with Arthur and with Miranda. But crucially, it doesn't matter how far you go. You're still from that place. You know, Kayet is the type of place where when someone asks where you're from, you describe somewhere that's close by. You don't tell them about the exact place you live because no one's ever heard of it. Like it's that type of place. And yeah, I guess I'm curious as we go through this book if our feelings about the hotel itself change, because it is fundamentally a heterotopia, but one, at least as a visitor, exclusively for the rich. And if you work there, it's kind of like it's like a summer camp, or it's like it's like working a job that like camp is the best analogy I can think of, where it's like you're there for like an extended period of time, you can't really leave, you're sort of stuck with the people you work with, and you have to like craft a life in the shadow of this employment that dominates everything. Like you could have recreation and you have time off and stuff, but like fundamentally the whole time you're there, your life is the hotel, right? Like it completely dominates everything. And that to me is also like a fundamentally interesting reflection on, I don't know, like the ways that at times we end up in these rooms with other people and we get trapped in those rooms and we sort of become powerless to leave those rooms, but you still have to like make a life within that room,
I think, yeah, Paul's, oh, not Paul's, who's the manager?
Walter?
Walter's story, like, I feel like really plays with these ideas, because for Walter, it seems like this, working at this hotel and staying there and being confined to Kayet is like the perfect situation for him at his point in time, because he just went through a messy divorce or whatever, and he's looking for an escape and tranquility and whatnot, and this is sort of like the closest thing it offers him. But like the question is there of like, is that place and his employment there like the perfect thing for him at that point in time, or has he just like convinced himself and adapted to his conditions, and convinced himself that like this is the best thing for him, even though like it's as you say, like it's a heterotopia. It's produced this thought in him that like this is the best place for him, when really it's like arbitrary, and like he could be doing anything else and be happier. Yeah.
Well, that may be the point of the hotel, because Al-Qaeda always goes there when he's like trying to escape from all of the financial stuff that he's doing. Both Vincent and Paul end up there because they were like trying to escape lives that they weren't happy in, or they were trying to find focus or whatever. So like everyone, it's almost like it's written like a halfway house, where they're going there and then they find their purpose and then they leave there, except for Walter, who finds his purpose was to stay there.
It's like that story from one of the Sandman stories, where like all the people like gather at this cabin, and like they don't know how they got there or what the hell is happening, but they're all just in the cabin every night, and they're like, this is just like a stop for me, I'm on my way, but they're there forever.
Yeah, he and this is I'll give you some of Walter thinking about this stuff. So this is page 51 of the EPUB. I'm sure this is a section that Darth has highlighted as well, because this shit goes so hard. So this is Walter reflecting on his interview with the hotel manager, Raphael. And this is Walter sort of thinking about it. Raphael loved the hotel. Walter could see that. And then this is Walter talking. The truth of the matter is that the demographic that will pay a great deal of money to escape temporarily from the modern world. Later, walking home through the autumn night, temporary escape from the world was an idea that Walter couldn't let go. In those days, he was renting a cramped one-bedroom on a street that felt somehow between neighborhoods. It was the most depressing apartment he'd ever seen, which for reasons he refused to articulate was why he'd chosen it. Elsewhere in the city, the ballet dancer whom Walter had been engaged until 2 months ago was setting up a house with a lawyer. Walter stopped into the usual grocery store on his way home that evening, and the thought of stopping into this store again tomorrow, and the day after that, and then the day after that, Slow strolls down the frozen food aisle, interspersed with shifts at the hotel where he'd been working for the past decade, a day older every time, the city closing in around him. Well, it was unbearable, actually. He placed a package of frozen corn in his basket. What if this was the last time he ever performed this action, here in this particular store? It was an appealing thought. He'd been with the ballet dancer for 12 years. He hadn't seen the breakup coming. He'd agreed with his friends that he shouldn't make any sudden moves, but what he wanted in those days was to disappear. And by the time he reached the checkout counter, he realized that he'd made his decision. He accepted the position, arrangements were made, and on the appointed day, a month later, he flew to Vancouver and then caught a connecting flight to Namano on a 24-seat prop plane that barely reached the clouds before descending, spent the night in a hotel, and set off the next day for Hotel Cayette. He could have saved considerable time by flying into one of the tiny airports further north, but he wanted to see more of Vancouver Island. And the phrase, the bit that really got me when I was reading this, it put me in my seat, if you know what I mean, was where he goes, it's the bit where he says he placed a package of frozen corn in the basket. What if this was the last time he ever performed this action here in this particular store? It was an appealing thought. That shit, that grabbed me out of my chair. It's such a mundane moment. And Mandel does this alchemy where she takes this idea of that we've all had, I'm sure, where you're doing a task that you do all the time and you catch yourself doing it and you go, fuck, is this what my life is? How did I get here? And it's that same passage that we read in Station 11 of Clark talking to that woman, and she's like, some people they just sleepwalk through their entire lives, and they wake up one day and they look around and they wonder how they fell into this life instead of some other life, and they realize that the life they've fallen into isn't one they want to be leading. And it, for me at least, when I was rereading it this time, it genuinely made me change some stuff in my life that's pretty significant. Stuff like this is what novels and fiction do that nonfiction and TV and film can't do. Is every time you come back to this passage, you're going to be in a different place in your life with different emotion and different feeling, and it's going to hit you in a different way. But I just it's fucking cosmic how simple these couple of sentences are. And it's how mundane that it was an appealing thought. It's not that it was destructive or it was alluring. It was just appealing. And it's enough that he realizes he's made the decision because of that emotional reaction, right? Which is really how this stuff goes, right? It's you go, oh, I'm gonna make this big life decision, and the second that you think about it, you have an emotional reaction, and that usually tells you everything you need to know about the decision that you're going to make. And I just love how perfectly Mandel captures just the way that people work, and the way that life changes often come from the small stuff, not the big stuff. It's the small moments, not the grandiose and the speeches and the stuff that we imagine in fiction and TV. And this is the real shit. It's standing there with the fucking basket in the grocery store and going, oh my god, my life is wrong. This shit is what I'm talking about. She could do the damn thing.
As in a book, you can do that mundane loop of self-reflection of picking up something, realizing that you've done it a million times before, thinking about what that means, thinking about if you're going to be doing that for the future, what do you want to do for the future? Not a spiral necessarily, but we all get caught in those introspective thought loops that explain the emotional reaction and then the actual decision to make a life change. And I think, to your point, it's hard to do that in another medium, because you don't, if you're doing inner monologues in a TV show, then you might not be the best TV show kind of thing.
Yeah. Unless you're Vince Gilligan and you're writing
Yeah.
like Better Call Saul, it's like pretty hard to do.
Well, Vince Gilligan doesn't do inner monologues, so
No, but he'll do like a
No.
montage that demonstrates the similar kind of thing.
that's true. Yeah.
So one thing that hit me about the description that you were just reading is that it harkens back to where we started, which was talking about feeling nostalgic for something that's currently happening. Only this is more like he's like you're the opposite of nostalgia. You're realizing that what is currently happening is not making you happy, whereas nostalgia is kind of like what's currently happening is making me happy. So it's interesting to see kind of like a the counter to that. The other interesting bit from that passage that you read was he describes the neighborhood as being like the street is between neighborhoods, but he can't describe how. And there's this kind of consistent theme of like moving between worlds in the book, which you can see in like that very first chapter, which is kind of like the introduction thing. Where am I? Neither in nor out of the ocean. I can't feel the cold anymore, or actually anything. I'm aware of a border, but I can't tell which side I'm on. And then when you get to the very last chapter, it again is this thing where you're moving between these borders and you can't really tell where you are. And you're, I don't know. So that when Walter is talking about that, and then I realized like that theme is also woven throughout the whole book of having these places, and you don't know where you are in relation to those spots, spots in time, or maybe it's just spots in your life's journey. I don't know, but that also hit me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why the book is full of water as well, is that like water has the quality of being glass, but also being like a permeable barrier. You know, water reflects and also distorts, and the hotel faces the water. You know, Vincent's life is like centrally about like the foundational thing that unites Vincent and Paul is that, you know, Vincent's mother drowned, and she's constantly thinking and talking about water. Later on, when she's with Jonathan, she swims all the time. I think that there is like this book is irreversibly about like the relationship that characters have to exactly what you were saying, Darth, which is like time and place and location. And one of the things that makes time and place and location vanish in this book's imagination is like the water. And yeah, I mean, like these characters are fundamentally moving between many heterotopias. And just for a quick refresher on the definition there, you know, the heterotopia is, you know, described by Foucault as worlds within worlds, both similar to their surroundings and contrasting with or upsetting them. Foucault describes the heterotopia as a place where few or none of the members of the space have an intelligible connection to one another. Ships, cemeteries, bars, brothels, prisons, planes. And in science fiction and fantasy and post-apocalypse, they're always often heterotopic in that they are worlds of radical difference that are indifferent to their inhabitants. Think of the Dying Earth fantasy with a world ending, where the ending world doesn't care about the people in it. Stories set in the vacuum of space or, you know, the deep sea and things like that. And one of the things that I think Mandel is particularly interested in is heterotopias of time, which is places where objects from many times are enclosed within one space, such that they are of a time and outside of time, as they are built to endure time, but not necessarily mark time. Museums, graveyards, churches, hotels, right? This idea that there are certain places that are designed for people to be in temporarily, but the place itself is designed to seem timeless. I think stadiums is another really good example of this, where like I had this thought the other week when we went to watch the football at the stadium in Brisbane, and I was walking and I had one of those real surreal like sense moments of this exact thing was something that I did when I was like 12, and it's the view and the everything about the experience is exactly the same because it's a place designed to be outside of time. And I think that like this book is centrally thinking about the way that time produces the things that Darth is describing. And that like some places feeling borderless makes them also feel timeless.
One other quick anecdote that I've got from you were talking about how some passages that you had read here and elsewhere had kind of like affected how you were making decisions and judging your emotions and stuff like that. And it reminded me that when I was trying to figure out what I wanted, whether it was something as simple as like what flavor of chip bag or something like that, is like, and you're like, I don't know what I want. Flip a coin, see if it's heads or tails. You know, heads, I'll take the barbecue. Tails, I'll take the sour cream and onion. You flip the coin, it comes up heads, and you're like, oh, I'm disappointed. Now you know. And so it's just interesting to think that like the mechanism for figuring out your own emotions can be really different, and you can like evolve that over time. Interesting side note.
It's just a really good tip, Darth. You just provided the listener like a really good tool. Because yeah, that would be when I'm standing there being like, "What do I want for lunch?" That would be like a really good thing to know. You could have told me that like 6 years ago, dude. What the fuck? I've been spending every Wednesday being like, "What do I want for lunch?" When I could have had this the whole time. Rude. Yeah, but that's exactly right. One thing I want to just quickly read before we move on, because it's like the central plot of the thing, is we go to the hotel. This is on page 47 in the EPUB. Spring 2005. Why don't you swallow broken glass? Words scrawled in acid paste on the glass eastern wall of the Hotel Cayette. Etched trails of white dripping from several letters. Who would write something like that? The only guest to have seen the vandalism, an insomniac shipping executive who checked in the day before, was sitting in one of the leather armchairs with a whiskey that the night manager had bought him. It was a little past 2:30 in the morning. Not an adult, presumably, the night manager said. His name was Walter, and this was the first graffiti he'd seen in his 3 years on the property. The message had been written on the outside of the glass. Walter had taped a few sheets of paper over the message and was presently moving the potted rhododendron to cover the paper, with the assistance of Larry, the night porter. The bartender on duty, Vincent, was polishing wine glasses while she watched the action from behind the bar at the end of the lobby. Walter had considered recruiting her to help move the planter because he could use another set of hands, and the night houseman was on a dinner break, but she didn't strike him as a particularly robust person. And the bit I love is later on he goes, where is it? Quick word of voice. It's the line where he's like, it finally occurs to him that it had been written in reverse, and so it was like it was supposed to be seen from the inside. I don't know where it is. I haven't highlighted that, but yeah, he sort of reflects on like the thing that really freaks him out is that yeah, someone wrote it deliberately so it was a threat for whoever was inside. I thought it was really, really like a good touch.
I had mentioned this earlier, but how much when y'all first like read that were you focusing on the words? Because I was like obsessing over this throughout the entire book. It and I'm curious if y'all like picked up on any of the same things that I did.
No, I have no idea why that was chosen as the phrase. I don't know. I mean, it's shocking, as all the characters say, but other than that, I don't know.
I mean, I know the answer. I'm just like, okay, I think I know. Anyway, I won't spoil where the book goes, but I will say what I think that the message means, which is this is Paul writing the message to Jonathan Alcides. His target is Jonathan Alcides. So read this. Jonathan Alcides owns the Glass Hotel. I think it's one of these like Paul being clumsily poetic and threatening. Don't swallow broken glass is like, oh, why don't you swallow broken glass? To the guy who owns the Glass Hotel who's doing all of these scams. I think that there's something there that I haven't fully put together yet. But literally that is my understanding of what it means.
I suppose like that would make sense if he's trying to be like clumsily poetic, because when he gets called out by Walter, he says, "You can't even swallow broken glass." Like that's his defense.
Yeah.
And like, so yeah, he does obviously like doesn't mean it literally. Yeah. So
Yeah, so the rest of the time I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, so it did not literally mean swallow glass, because the kid says you can't literally do that. So obviously like it's a riddle or it means something else. So what does it mean? And then I was like, wait a minute. No, you totally can swallow broken glass. He's just absolutely wrong. Or lying or
I think
something.
Paul's just, we're supposed to just think that Paul's a bit dumb, I think.
But I don't know, the inclusion of that line, by the author is then supposed to trick the audience into thinking, oh, of course you can't swallow broken glass, so it must mean something else, right? Like Paul pitching that idea and saying it convincingly, and then Walter cutting him off and he doesn't have a chance to explain any further. I don't know. So that whole thing, I kept looking for it to have like some other meaning, and then combine that with the way that the sentence was written. If it was a command, it would have been eat broken glass. But because it was why don't you eat broken glass, that's a question to me. I never had any doubt that it was supposed to have been a question, thus leading to me back to the riddle of who were they trying to ask this and what does it actually mean. And then when he said, okay, so if it's a question, why don't you, like, why don't people? And then Paul makes it sound like it's a biological thing. And so I went on a tangent through this whole thing. So that's why I was trying to figure out if this was just me being me.
No, I didn't think too much about it, to be honest. I went, oh yeah, he's threatening Jonathan because Jonathan's a scam guy. That was about the end of my thought process. So
yeah, same.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't entirely convinced that Paul did it, because I was like, well, his sister was the one who has the precedent for it, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that was the other thing, was their reactions. That was something that like bothered me throughout the entire rest of the book, was they all, and maybe this was like done intentionally to paint the idea that the people who live in this upper echelon of society, they have different like morality codes or whatever. But assuming that it was literally a threat and saying, why don't you eat broken glass and like die, like that's not even in my top like 100 worst things that have ever been said to me in the YouTube comment section. But everyone there was like shaking and drinking whiskey and like, can you believe what they said? It was horrible. And Vincent was like crying behind the bar. And so like that bothered me the entire time. I was like, this cannot be the worst thing that has ever been said around these people. Why is everyone acting like this is the most like vehemently terrible thing? And why was Vincent crying? That also really
yeah, that I can explain. So the way that you've got to think about this is it comes back to what Pat was talking about with class, where Hotel Kayet is presented in this book as a kind of I'm going to use this word, and I don't mean this literally, Darth, so understand that I'm sort of talking figuratively. The hotel is presented as a kind of like hologram of a real hotel, and it's like projected into the wilderness. Like it's a 5-star hotel. It's in the middle of nowhere where no one has any money, and the entire access to this hotel is mediated through like you either have to work there or be extremely wealthy. And I think that the book presents this idea of the hotel as being, like I said before, like heterotopias of time. This is like designed fundamentally as a location to be unchanged. Every time you come back to it, it's exactly the same. And so it's not the words themselves necessarily, but it's the notion that someone could vandalize this place that is like timeless, and also that they could vandalize it with a threat disrupts the projection of the hologram. Like it's this sort of the book is arguing that like the centralizing principle of the reality of the hotel is capitalism, right? It's like its own level of capital extraction where you think that Hotel Cayette is like you get on the boat, you go to the harbor, you get the bus to the harbor, you get on the boat, someone drives there, and you get off the boat and you're at the hotel. But actually, the hotel is everywhere. Like it is in the same way that like capital is like diffused through reality. Hotel Cayette like is, I don't know necessarily that she's read Baudrillard, but I think this is like a pretty compelling, like kind of the type of argument that Baudrillard would make, which is deeply provocative. I think it's less useful than like, Deleuze and Guattari and things like that. But I guess like if Station 11 is a book about what happens when capitalism and society collapses and how you work through that, this novel seems concerned with how the individual systems of logistics are produced and decay under capitalism and the timeless places they can produce. And so it's the disruption of that timeless place, the disruption of that hologram. It's like an existential challenge to like the way that reality is constructed. That's why it's so upsetting. It's because it proves that it doesn't matter how much money you have, a fucking kid can still graffiti on your goddamn wall. That's not how it's supposed to work. Like the structure and principle of reality is if you have enough money, and this hotel is like an example of that, you're insulated from that type of consequence. You control what is and isn't possible, and this is a disruption of that control. And for Vincent as well, I think that, I think that she's also just in a place where any significant disruption to her life is going to be upsetting. And so I think that for her specifically, it's scary because any change is scary to her. She's come to this place for the same reason that Walter did, escape, and escape from life. And this is life, like, sneaking its way back into this place where life theoretically doesn't have any right to be.
I mean, wasn't in Vincent's chapter, wasn't she also talking about how the night she met Alcitus, she was like a bit of in despair about the state of her life, and like, she was like feeling a bit of ennui and stuff like that. So maybe that was it. And wait, that was the night where she met Alcitus, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because a thing to say as well is Leon Provant is the guy who's at the hotel who's not sleeping. Leon is Miranda's boss in Station 11.
Oh.
I kept thinking that had to be the case. Anyway, I think that looking like at the text, the reason that Vincent would have been crying is because she would have seeing anything written on glass with the marker actually like melts the glass, so it's not like a ink that's on there. It's like the glass is got acid on it and it's like etched into the glass itself. And that's what she did when she was 13 or whatever. And so you would think that this is reminding her of all the stuff, and then she did that back when she was 13 because of her mom dying and what she was going through. So that's why she would be crying in that moment. But the book never really gets you there. You just would have to like infer that.
Yeah, I mean, that's most of this book, is being like, here's the thing, figure it out. Like, figure out how you feel about it. Yeah. I think that's also right. I think that it's like it's this like reminder of this thing that she did in reaction to, her mother's death, and it makes perfect sense for her to be upset in seeing this.
I also love the hologram analogy, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Alcitus buy the hotel from someone else?
Yeah, he bought it from the original owners, yeah.
Yeah, so if you think about it, like not necessarily a hologram, but like it is not something that was ever going to survive because it's just in too poor of a location and maybe for too rich and too rare of a clientele, because like it failed before Alcitus bought it, and then it failed after he bought it. Like it was never going to like they were gonna, like, I think tear it down or something at the end. So it was never going to survive, just like I guess a lot of the characters and the way that they are going. So it was much more of a temporary thing in its literal self as well.
Yeah, it has no logical reason to exist, and it's this like bizarre like blemish on like how reality should function. When Walter first sees it, he's on it basically like you have to get a boat from Grace Harbor. And this is him seeing it for the first time. I think this is page 55 in the EPUB. Melissa piloted them around the peninsula, and the hotel was before them. An impossible palace lit up against the darkness of the forest, and for the first time, Walter understood what Raphael had meant when he talked about an element of surrealism. The building would have been beautiful anywhere, but placed here was incongruous, and its incongruity played a part in its enchantment. The lobby was exposed like an aquarium behind a wall of glass, all cedar pillars and slate floors. A double row of lights illuminated the path to the pier, where a doorman, Larry, met them with a trolley. Walter took Larry's hand and followed his luggage up the path to the hotel's grand entrance, to the reception desk, where Raphael stood waiting with a concierge smile. Blah, 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 blah. He closed the curtains against the darkness and thought about what Raphael had said, about the hotel existing outside of time and space. There's such happiness in a successful escape. In the hours following the graffiti, the forest outside seemed newly dark, the shadows dense and freighted with menace. Who stepped out of the forest to write the message on the window? The message was written backwards on the glass, Walter wrote on the incident report, which suggests it was meant to be viewed from the lobby. Come on. Come on. Are you kidding me? This impossible fucking beacon in the darkness, this like palace of light, and the description of aquarium, again, talking about water and the place of water and stuff like that. I think that like it's impossible to look past the qualities of this thing that frankly, it's astoundingly like, I imagine each of us have a different imagination of what exactly the hotel looks like. But I would put good money on each of us having like incomplete and competing notions of like visually what this place looks like. Like you kind of glimpse it through fragments of different people's perspectives in a way that makes it impossible to imagine in totality. Like in my head, I can imagine the path up to the hotel lobby, the front of the hotel, like as you walk into it, and the bar. But I kind of can't picture like the rooms themselves or like the armchairs or the dock. Like it's really interesting the way that it sort of that Mandel gives you fragments of this location as opposed to like a total picture.
Yeah, and it is different from the different characters' perspectives, because Vincent, there's some line in there about like after she's living with Al-Qaeda and she's like, this is nothing like the mold infested room that I had back at the hotel. Or it was like mildew that they could never get rid of, or I don't remember how they phrased it, but the picture is painted that it's this, pristine upper level thing, but in the servants' quarters or the employees' quarters, they never could get rid of the mildew.
Which is such a good contrast to Walter, who has like a room on like one of the top floors that's like really clean and tidy and stuff like that. Like there's even a class divide in the employees of the hotel as well. Yeah. I guess the next thing that I want to kind of touch on before we take a break here is I mentioned Leon Provant. He is staying at the hotel. He works for the logistics company that we get in Station 11. And he thinks that he's going to be made redundant. There's been like an acquisition and like an upcoming merger. And he's like sort of spent all this money on this holiday, and he's starting to be like, oh fuck, like this is a bad idea. And he has like yet another really classic like Emily St John Mandel, like here is how logistics are. Did you have this highlighted as well, Darth? It's page 68 in the EPUB, but it's basically where he talks about like the tens of thousands of ships at sea at any given moment.
Mentally highlighted is like the very last paragraph when he says it's nothing that he would have told Al-Qaeda, and it's nothing he's even told his wife. but he pictures the ships moving across the ocean as like lights, like each one is a light just moving across. And I don't know why that's something he feels embarrassed to tell someone, but that really painted a picture for me, of just like kind of like a space shot, and you normally see the lights of the of the cities and everything, but instead it's just he's seeing all of the ships moving, and each one is representing the goods that he has ordered, and he is moving from place to place. And that was really poignant, and I really loved that last bit of imagery, and also the fact that he says that he can turn that off. It's talking about how he's this transportation person for all of these different things, and he could look at his wife and he could see the woman that he loves, but then he could flip that switch in his brain and he could see that the shirt came on this boat from China, and the pants came on this boat from India, and the purse came from here, and he could see these lines across the globe looking at his wife from where everything came from. Yeah, really interesting stuff.
So cool. He talks about it as like shifting radio frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so good. I was trying to find it because I didn't have it highlighted, but he what does he say? He said, because he never talked with anyone about the way he could tune in and out of shipping, like turning a dial on a radio. When he glanced, this is what you were talking about, Darth. When he glanced across the table at Marie, for example, he could see the woman he loved, or he could shift frequencies and see the dress made in the UK, the shoes made in China, the Italian leather handbag, or shift even further and see the Neptune Avramidis shipping routes lit up on the map. The dress via westbound transatlantic route 3, the shoes via either Trans-Pacific eastbound 7 or the Shanghai Los Angeles eastbound express, etc. Or further still into the kind of language he'd never speak aloud, not even to Marie. There are tens of thousands of ships at sea at any given moment, and he liked to imagine each as a point of light converging into rivers of electric brilliance over the night oceans, flowing through the narrow channels of the Suez and Panama canals, the Strait of Gibraltar, around the edges of continents, and out into the oceans, an unceasing movement that drove countries, a secret world that he loved so much. Hey, if you don't have goosebumps, man, I don't know what the fuck is wrong with you, because that shit goes.
Is Leon like mega autistic? Is that what's going on?
Bro, I don't know, man. I don't know, man, but...
David's like, isn't that awesome? And Patrick's like, is he autistic?
It's just so sick. It's so cool. I fucking love this goddamn author.
I kind of forgot that we had a whole section from Leon's perspective. Was that in someone else's chapter, or did he have his own chapter?
He got like half a chapter off the back of Walter's chapter.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
There might be a lot of stuff in here kind of hinting towards that, although I don't know if it's obviously like autism is a spectrum. I don't know where, but the video camera stuff that Vincent is always shooting, like at one point she voices the thought, I wonder if this is like me expressing something, or if this is like my OCD coming out or something like that. And the way that Leon is talking about stuff here, and I feel like there's probably a couple other examples throughout the book that make me feel like either the author's putting that stuff in there intentionally, or if it's just something about her kind of leaking into the characters.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
it is interesting.
A lot of this stuff, I was actually thinking about that as well, like, because a lot of the stuff feels very raw and real, like, I feel like a lot of this must be like lived experience. It's just so like specific.
Yeah, I mean, without giving the game away, there will be like an author insert character in Sea of Tranquility, to the extent that like you can look at into like this really weird exercise that we'll do where like you can look at the book of Sea of Tranquility and then literally trace Emily St John Mandel's like life after lockdown. It's like 1-to-1. So I think she's always like reflecting and like trying to reflect on different parts of herself, and the logistic stuff she's like obsessed with, I think. And the idea of like the invisible world of logistics that like runs everything that no one ever sees, I think is like central of like a thing that she's just interested in. Which is kind of like, this is like classic author stuff where you become like obsessed with something really specific that no one else is into. And you're like, I gotta put this in a book. Like someone has to read about this. It'll be cool. And it turns out it is cool. But obviously what we're getting here through Leon is a redressing of the way that Miranda thinks about this stuff in Station 11. We got some of the passages from the book that we read on the show as well. But obviously, this philosophy of logistics isn't how something gets from point A to point B. It's the right way that things move through the world. This is sort of a expansion of that idea, I think. Cool. So, I've got a couple more things and then we can take a quick break. The other thing, obviously we talked about this already, but Vincent ends up with Jonathan Alcides. Paul is fired that night for the graffiti. Vincent leaves like basically at the same time on leave, and then ends up with Jonathan, doesn't go back to the hotel. And like Pat has already kind of said, Vincent, like her relationship with Jonathan is like really it's like this semi-opaque thing where they both seem to know exactly what it is, which is like she knows she's a trophy wife and she knows that this thing isn't quite real, but she's fine with that because she's aware of that. It's very strange.
Well, it's interesting how she is quite reluctant to use that term on herself. Like she calls her friends that, but I don't think she ever refers to herself as a trophy wife. And it's like, I don't know, she's like, yeah, she knows what the situation is, but like she kind of is still reluctant to like address it. I don't know.
I think that was because that he did not accept her or want her as a wife. And so because he did not want that makes her feel not wanted, so she didn't ever want to claim that title, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also think that like it's that thing of like she grew up incredibly poor, and like there's, I don't know what the expression is, but there's an expression about this which is like, if you've ever not had any money, you will never be someone who doesn't think of themselves as someone that doesn't have money, no matter how much money you have. And I think that that's part of why she doesn't identify that way, is she still sees like the real world and like how things actually work. She still has perspective on things, and she doesn't lose that no matter how much money that the Jonathan provides her. And you see her reflecting on that constantly and worrying about it, right? She worries like how long it will take her to stop seeing the people that work at their house, you know? Like she's concerned about losing her like grip on what it means to be a real person. And I think that concern is what means that she doesn't see herself as a trophy wife, because that would mean letting go of that reality.
There must be another section. So page 58, no one actually uses the phrase trophy wife in conversation, but Jonathan was 35 years older than Vincent. She understood what she was. So maybe there's a section later on that we're all remembering where she like denies feeling like a trophy wife, but at least on that paragraph is saying that she understands that she is a trophy wife.
Well, I mean, that's not still directly saying like, no one ever used the word trophy wife, but like, yeah, I know that's not the same as her saying that I'm a trophy wife. You know, like she like it's still like a degree of separation away of like I'm a trophy wife and I acknowledge that other people haven't called me a trophy wife kind of thing. Like I feel like there's still some distance there.
Well, like that's the structuring principle of the book, right? Which is like that there's the idea of something and then there's the actual reality of the thing. And like I think there's the idea of being a trophy wife, and then there's how Vincent actually experiences it. There's the idea of wilderness, and then there's the glass hotel. Like, it's there's the idea of being a punk rocker, and then there's fucking Paul. You know what I'm saying? Like it's all about like concept and reality, and like projection and reality, right? Like, yeah, like I've got this on page 84 in the EPUB, and this is like one of the central theses of the book. This is Vincent talking about her childhood. There's the idea of wilderness, and then there's the unglamorous labor of it. Never-ending grind of securing firewood, bringing in groceries over absurd distances, tending the vegetable garden, and maintaining the fences that keep the deer from eating all the vegetables, repairing the generator, remembering to get gas for the generator, composting, running out of water in the summertime, never having enough money because job opportunities in the wilderness are limited, managing the seething resentment of your only child who doesn't understand your love of the wilderness and asks every week why you can't just live in a normal place that isn't the wilderness. What Vincent's mother probably wouldn't have imagined a life, an arrangement in which Vincent wore a wedding ring but was not married. I want you to choose, Jonathan said at the beginning, but I just don't want to get married again. His wife Suzanne had died only 3 years earlier. They never said her name. But while he didn't want to marry Vincent, he did feel that wedding rings created an impression of stability. In my line of work, he said, managing other people's money, steadiness is everything. If I take you out to dinner with clients, it's better for you to be a beautiful young wife than a beautiful young girlfriend. So I think it's all of a piece with what you're saying, Pat, which is like, she's all of these things, but she doesn't necessarily accept them all in reality, even though that, you know, the idea of those things might be true. The reality is very different, I think, is the big headline.
What? And I think, you know, we can't underestimate just like regular human vanity as well. Like, I think all the characters to some degree are vain, but like as Vincent's life progresses, I feel like her vanity increases as well, and you know, like I think as well, like a very simple reason why she doesn't want to acknowledge being a trophy wife is because it has a negative connotation. Like, you know, it's and I think it's simply it. I think she just wants to think of herself as more grounded and more worldly than, you know, she maybe is in real life.
I think we all do, right? Like, I think that's like a
exactly,
universal thing.
Yeah.
There's several lines in there about making it sound like she wants to be in love. She liked to pretend that the ring on her finger was real. And then there's several other times where she's like, well, I enjoy being around him. But then it also, there's this hint that, like, and she says it with what was her name, Morella, or whoever, that like she loves Faisal that is her boyfriend, and she's like, I wish I had that. And so I think a lot of that might also be tying in with this. And then before I forget to mention it, there's another water thing, as we had talked about her swimming, but specifically in here somewhere it says that the reason that she forces herself to swim every night, even though she doesn't like it, is because she feels like she's drowning, and the practicing swimming is protecting her from drowning.
Yeah, I mean, there's that brilliant line in Station 11 where Clark is like, and Arthur are confronting each other, and Clark's like, she's like, Miranda's drowning, like, with a fucking brick, like, tied to her legs, and you're upset that she didn't like your silly movie or whatever. Like, there's a sort of, Vincent is like not the reversal. She's like another version of, she's another like sideways reality version of that whole dynamic. But the difference is that while she's in this situation, she's still doing little things to like push back against it being a foreclosed thing. It, like, the reality, and that she's actively keeping the reality and the idea of the thing separate by this act of like resistance, which is this like swimming every night.
Yeah. It was also just really poignant. The fact that it like directly mentions her drowning. No spoilers, but
I mean,
That's
I don't know
how
if
the
it's a
book
spoiler.
starts.
It's on page 1, so
Yeah.
yes. Okay, well, I think let's, unless you guys have anything else before the marriage and the what's the expression they use? The country of money, the land of money, kingdom of money. Unless you guys have anything else before the kingdom of money, we might take a quick break and then come back and talk about the big plot stuff that we get sort of post. Here are my notes. I'm sort of up to about page 90, if that helps calibrate.
This was just kind of like an aside, but they specifically, or she specifically mentions on page 67 the model of camera. It's a Canon HV10 was the one that she goes and was the expensive camera, quote unquote, that she goes and buys. And there's a lot that you can kind of unpack from that statement. One, the HV20 was my first camera back in 2004, and this is the HV10, so it was the previous model. I think mine was like $1,000 when I got it, and it's like the prosumer range of cameras. Like it's better than like the lowest model, but it's still something that the average person would go buy. It's not something that someone who is wealthy would say, "Oh, this is expensive." Like those cameras are like 30 grand for the lens, you know? So like it's talking about her living in this stage, but it's also painting a really low level as to what this level of wealth actually is. And I don't know how intentional that is, if she just maybe looked up some random name of a camera, or if I'm digging too deep into it. But I did think that was interesting, that like, this is this great expensive camera, and I'm like, you're it's not 100 grand. It's nowhere close to that. It's not expensive.
I no part of me thinks that's an accident. That's Mandel like doing the socialist thing of being like, yeah, when you're really fucking poor, expensive means something different. Expensive is $50 instead of 20.
Yeah. So yeah, okay. I was going from the other direction and thinking that it was inferring that like Al-Qaeda was not as rich, like it was showing the cracks in his wealth. But yeah, that makes way more sense. That it's her seeing, it's her inferring what she thinks expensive is, when he would look at that and say that's pocket change. Why didn't you get something expensive?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's always my reading of that. Is you have to view her at all times as someone that expects to never have money. Cool. Okay, well, let's take a quick break. Then we're going to come back and talk more about the Kingdom of Money, and what it means to live a life of luxury. So we'll be right back after these messages. This post-apocalypse unit is sponsored by the Maynard Trigg series. You can find these books at underink.press. They are my science fantasy coming-of-age novels. If you like post-apocalypse fiction, I guarantee you'll like these novels. They take place in a dying world far above the earth in the skies. They are fantasy novels, they are mystery novels, they are coming-of-age. If you enjoy the things we talk about and the way we talk about them, I guarantee you'll like these novels. Use code REVIEW10 at checkout. That's REVIEW10 at checkout for 10% off the original hardback of the first novel. That's this one right here. Once again, REVIEW10 at underink.press to grab your copy of the first Maynard Trigg book today. Welcome back. We're talking about the Kingdom of Money. And there is one thing that I wanted to say real quick. Did you guys pick up on the Station 11, like, reality thing that happens around this point in the book? I think I've got it at page 91 in the EPUB. Yes. Yeah. So here, I'll just give you the passage. And then we can talk about it. She'd read newspaper. This is Vincent talking. I think, no, wait, hold on. Or is this Olivia? Wait. Yeah, this is Vincent. She'd read newspapers all her life because she felt that she was desperately undereducated and wanted to be an informed and knowledgeable person. But in the age of money, she would often read a news story and find herself uneasily distracted by its opposite, Imagine an alternative reality where no Iraq War, for example, or where the terrifying new swine flu in the Republic of Georgia hadn't been swiftly contained. An alternative world where the Georgia flu blossomed into an unstoppable pandemic and civilization collapsed. A variation of reality where North Korea hadn't fired test missiles, where the terrorist bombings in London hadn't happened, where the Israeli Prime Minister hadn't suffered a stroke. Or spin it back even further, a version of history where the Korean Peninsula was never divided, where the USSR had never invaded Afghanistan or Al-Qaeda had never been founded, where Ariel Sharon died in combat as a young man. She could only play this game for so long before she was overcome by a kind of vertigo and had to make herself stop. So the Georgia flu there is the flu that destroys the world in Station 11. What do you guys think this means?
I mean, at the time, I didn't read anything into it because there's been, I've lost count of how many like dangerous, not fully pandemics, but there have been a lot of, there was the swine flu, there was the bird flu. This was back in 2008 ish. I know one of those two was back then. So there have been like those issues every like 10 years. There's a major like health crisis. I don't remember what the timeline is, but there was like it's pretty recurring. Every 5 years, every 10 years, I don't remember what it was, but there's going to be a major health problem from a virus or something like that. So like when I read that in the book, I was like, maybe that's related, but also it's always happening. So I felt like I was reading too much into it for me to be trying to force Station 11 in at that point. Because I was like, no, you're overthinking it. Let it go.
Yeah, I was also like thinking like this can't be connected to Station 11. Like I think that there's not enough evidence and there's too much like assumptions for that to be the case.
Okay.
Because something like I don't know, was the pandemic in Station 11 from Georgia? I don't know. Maybe it was explained in the book.
And I think it spread too fast also from, like, granted, the timeline in this book is all wibbly wobbly, so I'm not really sure where that happens in relation, but like all of that was before the finance troubles, which seemed to last quite a while. So maybe the pandemic in Station 11 like evolved slower than I would have initially thought, but the way that it spread made you kind of assume that it went from like 0 to 100 really, really quick. But if she's reading about it in a paper and it's not a problem for like years, then that's different than what I thought Station 11 showed.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot what your initial like leading question was. So it seems like it's a parallel reality is my guess.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Which is also really interesting because like the passage you just read was also very much what Al-Qaeda is doing at the end, where everything is these like parallelisms, and that's what his quote unquote wife is doing now.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think parallelism is probably the word that we're going to use for now. I guess we'll see where it goes. I just wanted to call it out as a detail because I think it's like a salient quality of these three books is this question of like, is this the same world? Is it different? Are these people just named the same thing? There's some questions of like reality here that we'll certainly come to in some much more granular detail when we get to Sea of Tranquility, where that book is really like thinking about what these two novels are when put together.
And we did skip over like him seeing Charlie's ghost multiple times. So like very, very definitively, like the supernatural has been painted into these first 5 chapters to the point where you're not really sure what quote unquote reality is. Except that after Station 11, I am firmly like the astronaut is not real. Like you are, Emily, you are not going to get me twice in a row. So these early sightings of the ghost, I'm like, I don't,
You'll
I
log
don't
on next
believe
week
you.
and be like, I thought there were werewolves in this story, and they weren't.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Don Draper sees dead people. I think that's just a literary thing.
Correct.
I don't think it's necessarily supernatural. Yeah.
Yeah, I've written down here on my notes. Gloss Hotel is a story about phantoms, half recalled resentments, and emerging bursts of potential freedom and potential futures. Phantoms being both literal and metaphorical.
And a lot of that is the way that they phrase it, because like they end one of the chapters on like with the sentence, and that wasn't the first time that I saw Charlie's ghost. Something like that, where it is so definitively phrased that you're thinking, okay, this is not just normal PTSD, remembering my past kind of stuff. If that sentence had been written a different way, then you would have been like, oh, they're just remembering their past.
I'm with Pat that I just read it as like that it's like a literary device to like produce the way that people are haunted by like past mistakes and past traumas and stuff. But yeah, I know what you mean, Darth.
I'm reading the sentence literally, and y'all
Shocking.
That tracks.
It's also tricky because I also think that in totality, if you put these three books together, there's no reason why the thing that you're saying couldn't be true. So I'm also in a tricky place where I think from a genre perspective, this book by itself is aligning itself to Pat's point of view, but then the project that we're doing and the method that we're doing means that the method suggests that Darth is maybe almost onto something, but then the text itself suggests that Pat is correct. So I think it's like a both and scenario where you can kind of choose to believe both in equal measure, and they don't necessarily have to contradict each other, but they produce different meanings. You know what I mean?
I don't know why I was about to be like, Dad, you got to pick. One of us is right.
You're both right? Question mark. Yeah, the big a big thing that we talked around that I want to like put a fucking pin directly through and put it up on the board is that Vincent, living with Jonathan, has like seemingly unlimited money, and this really fucks with her brain a lot. Like she has a lot of trouble with this fact that she has all this money, and there's this absolute like all-time summary of what this is like, where she says, and this is I've got this on 161 in the EPUB. 106 in the EPUB. If money is a country, there were other citizens whom Vincent liked much less. Which was a sentence that I read and I went, what the fuck does that mean? If money is a country, there were other citizens whom Vincent liked much less. And I was like sitting there being like, what is she talking about? And like I think like the it's actually not that complicated. It's just a very like dense idea. But the notion is that like she thinks of money as this kingdom or this place or a location, a kingdom of money. She doesn't think of money as money. She thinks of it as like a physical place that some people have access to that other people don't. This is some real like capitalist realism shit. This is like some proper materialism stuff. And the thing that I think really is interesting about Vincent's experience living under Jonathan's wealth is that she kind of gets to process everything at a remove, which we've already talked about a little bit. But that sentence comes at the start of a dinner with an investor, and it's actually that same shitty guy that you guys were talking about earlier, the one who is talking about Annika and the deal that she pushed back on at the last minute. It's the beginning of that dinner. And what I really like about it is this exchange is like a good summation of the way that Vincent sees Jonathan and his life and his money, as opposed to the way that the people in Jonathan's life see it. Where she kind of she sees the facade that is being produced by this money, and she like wholly rejects the facade, but she kind of like rejects it as a reality and instead treats it like a fantasy. And that all of this is like surreal and not quite tangible and not quite there. which is the same way a lot of people view the hotel itself. Like, there's something here about capital, wealth, and like fantasy and escape. In the same way that the Glass Hotel itself is like an escape, it is predicated on money. Jonathan's life is like an escape from reality in some sense, and a temporary one at that, to Darth's point before, in that all of this ends at some point.
I like Vincent's reasoning for this, producing this idea about the kingdom of money, and it's quite a simple one, and it's quite true, is because anywhere around the world, when you have enough money, like, everything looks the same. Like, everything is built with the same with the same stone marble and the same huge glass panels and the same minimalist, like, no sink design in your hotel bathroom or whatever. Like, I think it's a really, like, accurate, like, assessment of wealth, and that it's a really, like, sort of, like, understandable metaphor.
You're kind of quoting Morella on page 78, and she says, what I've learned about money, I was trying to figure out why my life felt more or less the same in Singapore as it does in London, and that's what I realized, that money is its own country. And so I don't know if like, Vincent got this idea from Mirella, or if she was kind of thinking of money as its own country before she met her and had this conversation. But I think what's interesting about that initial quote that David read about money is its own country, and I don't like when she mentions the citizens, that's talking about the wealthy. It's saying like she loves the country of wealth, but she hates the people there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, which is like a thing that I think we roundly, as a type of person, the type of people that we are, I think we would probably, I think we've all experienced, I'll speak for myself, right? I've definitely experienced moments like this where other people that have similar wealth to me, I will interact with and be like, you're a fucking reptile. This is insane. Like, you're a crazy person. This is wild. You're so unlikable and weird. And then there's people with, like, huge amounts of wealth that I've met where I'm like, oh, they seem like kind of normal. But yeah, I think it's Vincent being like, the money thing is cool, but she has a thesis on this. I've got this on 121 on the EPUB, which she says, although of course the clothing wasn't the point, Vincent thought later, on the train back to Greenwich, it wasn't the stuff that kept her in this strange new life, in the kingdom of money. It wasn't the clothing and objects and handbags and shoes. It wasn't the beautiful home, the travel. It wasn't Jonathan's company, although she did genuinely like him. It wasn't even inertia. What kept her in the kingdom was the previously unimaginable condition of not having to think about money. Because that's what money gives you, the freedom to stop thinking about money. If you've never been without, then you won't understand the profundity of this, how absolutely this changes your life. And let me tell you, this is fucking real. If you've never been in a place where, rewind 10 years, right? 2015, I've got my first real job. Every single decision, every second of my life is predicated around how much money do I have? Is the thing I'm doing spending money or making money, right? I've just graduated university. I've got a full-time job and I'm still working in the kitchen part-time. If you've never been in a place where money at all times is like, if you've never been in that place where it's not the governing principle of how you structure your reality, then you won't understand what Vincent is talking about. And that's not on you. Like, that's like a really, like, privileged place to be in. That's like a really fortunate position to be in. But if you've been in that place and then you get to a place where you're making money such that you don't have to think about money, such that you can tap your credit card, you don't really have to think about whether you can afford for the thing that you're paying for because you kind of roundly know that you have enough money, right? They are different. They are like different realities to exist in. And I think that what Mandel is trying to get at is certainly something I've experienced and have been coming to terms with recently, is the allure of being in the kingdom of money isn't about being in the kingdom of money. It's the allure of not having to go back to the other thing. And when you're in the kingdom of money, that is a powerful thing indeed. That makes you do some really questionable shit and make some really poor decisions, because the threat of going back to that other thing is so much higher than the pleasure that comes with having money. If that makes sense.
It might be like a simple word like a peace, like you have never experienced the peace or the safety of not having to worry, and it's that feeling of being able to let go of worry that is the real thing of value.
Mm-hmm. But I think that eventually produces the other worry, which is the worry of it's the worry of that you might have to worry again at some point. Which sounds silly, but that's real.
I feel if you're poor and and you need more money, because you have bills to pay and whatnot, you generally know exactly what you need the money for. You need it to pay these bills, which is this much. You would like this thing, which is this much. You don't need to move to here and it costs this much, kind of thing. Whereas if you're not worrying about money, and the threat is that you'll lose money, like that's a much more terrifying process of imagination, because if you're not worrying about money, you don't know like what is going to happen to your life. You don't know like what's going to get taken away. You don't know how far you're potentially going to fall, and you don't know how much chaos is going to ensue. So I feel, yeah, to your point, David, like I think it's a much more terrifying prospect, like the other way, because it's like very vague, and it's just and it's vague, but also like you have a pretty good idea of like the the downward trajectory of your life if you do lose money, like that's pretty kind of certain.
Yeah, you just have a lot more to lose because you have a lot more, right?
Yeah.
And I think that can produce this other thing in some people that have been wealthy for too long, where, and you see this all the time with like the executive cast, they all seem to know that capitalism is kind of doomed. And so all of these really, really rich people all have these little hobby farms where they like buy property and they have like a self-sustaining farm that they go to like every couple months, so that if and when they choose to retire, they can live outside the system. Because to them, that's the best way to avoid losing the thing that has insulated them from the consequences of the system, is indeed like, going out of your way to sort of you make enough money so that you never have to think about money, so that you can remove yourself from the threat of money going away. Like that's like the end goal for all these rich people. Which it's like, yeah, so they know the system is wrong. And they're doing the like, fuck you, I got mine type thing to the, nth degree. And I think that Jonathan, in Vincent's eyes, it's really interesting. I think in the first half of this book, she never quite finds a steady judgment of Jonathan's work. If you know what I mean? Like, she seems to sense that, like, maybe some of his investments don't really, like, the numbers may not make sense, or, there's something about it that seems off, but, like, she doesn't judge Jonathan himself because of the money. Like, she judges Jonathan because of, like, the way that he treats her and this kind of transactional relationship they have. I don't know, I find that, like, kind of slippery to get my brain, like, to get my head around, like, what, at this point in the story, Vincent thinks of Jonathan.
Yeah, well, I think she certainly has no, or is willfully like looking away from the money, because I remember she when she's talking with that annoying guy, and she has this thought where like, um, Jonathan looks really sort of like apprehensive that he's going to reveal something to me that Jonathan doesn't want me to know. And so, you know, the implication being that like there's some dodgy money situation happening here, but I don't know, she doesn't really give it a second thought. She just like has that acknowledgement, and she's like, whatever.
I think part of the answer to David's question is going back and looking at like one of the first descriptions of Al-Qaeda, which may be when Vincent met him. It was like somewhere around that area of the novel, but he's like a pretty likable guy, and it describes him as having like an aura of calmness and centeredness, and he makes you want him to like you, even when he's just sitting there and not doing anything obviously to make you want that. So like the reason that she would like him and want to be in this situation is also just because he has a certain charisma that I don't know anyone else in the book is painted as having. And that doesn't really come up as much, if ever, after that first point, which is interesting because after that it's just like only about the wealth as to why she's the lifestyle, not necessarily the wealth, but like she talks about the benefit being the lifestyle, and it never goes back to like all of these things that are good about him. You know, she mentions that she likes him, but she's not like, oh, he's so kind to other people and all of this, you know, whatever the other stuff is that at the beginning painted him out as, you know, being this, you know, pretty great dude.
You know what it reminds me of is the relationship between Roger and Jane in Mad Men, where, you know, like from Jane's perspective, like Roger is like, you know, they're not in love, but like Roger is like kind of like a handsome enough man to like not, you know, be worried about that. But and then obviously like the main thing is like he's very rich, but like he's affable enough, he's handsome enough, you know, he's not abusive, he's just like he's just like there's nothing really terribly wrong with him, and he's just the best prospect kind of thing. And you know, it's transactional in the same way. And I don't know, I see a lot of parallels with Vincent and Al-Qaeda,
Which is a really like old-fashioned kind of mindset for marriage, is that it used to be a lot more of like, this is the best thing for the woman because the man has the means of wealth to provide for her. And I've been wondering, because Paul was painted as being such a fan of classical music and mentioning, you know, Beethoven and Mozart and all of these really old composers, which would not, considering the type of music that he's into, you know, going on later, like it doesn't jive at all. And so I kept wondering if it's supposed to be hinting that there's this like connection with history, like these people have like old souls or something. And so the idea that Vincent is entering into this older type of marriage where it's just purely for her financial stability, if like those ideas were all tied together somehow.
Yeah, well, I mean, if the book thinks about money as an escape, right, then it's any means necessary, and sometimes that means doing things that compromise you, right? Like the fact that Vincent enters into this relationship to, you know, first and foremost, escape the hotel, and escape the position that she finds herself in, is more important than whether she actually likes this guy. Like, money is so elemental in its ability to influence our lives that the prospect of not having to worry about money is so tempting that it sort of overrides everything else. Like, her natural instincts of like, yeah, like this isn't all like, Vincent seems like she would be like, in our, you know, modern parlance, she would be like a pretty normal like third wave feminist. who would think that this kind of thing is bad. But also, I think this is the flip side of that kind of thinking. But also, part of it is, yeah, it's kind of also okay, you know, gender neutral terms, right? This kind of relationship is just a thing that happens. And I think for Vincent, it's like, she seems to sense even in the moment that it's temporary. And I think that's what makes it okay to her. And that's why it feels more pragmatic than it does anything else. And that to me feels kind of weirdly feminist. I don't know. It's kind of freighted, but yeah, my reading is like her knowing that it's temporary is what makes it possible and not feel as, yeah, like as you say, Darth, like old fashioned, I guess.
There's no, yeah, I guess she feels quite safe with Archidas as well. She's not like, she feels that he's not the type of person to be vindictive, and that's why like she feels that she can exit the relationship at any point, maybe.
Yeah, he feels so neutral, right? Like, yeah. The thing that's interesting, so this is the bit that you were talking about, Pat, just to sort of provide the passage, and then you go, Darth. But this is at the dinner. What was strange was that she was certain Jonathan was listening very intently to her conversation with Lenny, even though he was gazing at Tiffany and nodding at what Tiffany was saying. It seemed to her that there was something that Jonathan didn't want Lenny to reveal. And this is the like other layer to Jonathan is occasionally, you know, the opacity dissolves and she kind of glimpses the real guy that's behind this sort of passive, likable, charming dude.
He, in that scene, he also, I think he said enough, because he said, when I figured out how his investments work, that's when I knew blah 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 blah, which that was enough to clue you in that, like, for the most part, you don't have to figure out how investments work. You know, you're just like, he invested the money, he got a return. That's normal. But like, if it's a secret and you figure it out, then now it's sketchy. You know? So it's not like she needed to hear anything more. Like, she already figured out, she heard enough right then to give her a clue. And I'm trying to remember if, like, later on in the book she may have said something like, I always knew deep down, but I didn't want to question, you know, I didn't want to question the kingdom of money. I could see her saying that.
Yeah, she has several thoughts like that toward the end. But like, I guess it's that kind of thing of like, there are certain bells that you can't unring. And like, sometimes you know where the bell is and you choose not to ring it because you're like, if I do this, this will be irreversible. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's the position she finds herself in, where the second that she digs into it, she can never undig into it, you know?
Which is interesting because it's like the reverse of Paul asking Annika out. Like, he couldn't stop himself.
Yep. Yep. It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. It is the reverse. Cool. Yeah. Good book. I guess the last bit here is the Olivia section, which we can kind of talk through. So Olivia is she's a painter in the 80s, and she has this weird relationship with what's Jonathan's brother's name? Is it Lucas? Yeah, she has this like sort of weird I don't even know what you call it, but like, you know, would you call it adversarial? I'm not sure. Like, there's sort of a rivalry or something. Maybe attraction. It's really hard to tell between her and Lucas. Lucas is another artist. He's a painter and he's also a heroin addict. And we sort of slip through her perspective across a number of years where she paints Lucas and she paints like quote unquote the real him, which is this kind of heroin addict. She goes through her life and just her life never really works. And then as Darth just said at the top, her painting is bought by someone, she doesn't know who, and you know, she makes all this money, and she decides to invest it with Jonathan. And we learn later that it was Jonathan that bought the painting, right? Yeah. And so he kind of like, it's really cool. Jonathan kind of forecloses the production of this investment by buying the painting himself and then having the money. Like, it's this weird, like, he spends the money so that she'll have money to invest with him, which he's going to steal. You know what I mean? It's very strange.
I think it was also he bought the painting from the person who bought the painting. He just wanted the painting.
Right.
So, I mean, like,
oh, and then it's just ironic
yeah,
that she invests it with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I took it as well. I didn't see this as a plan to move money around. He wanted the painting because it's his brother,
Right.
essentially. Yeah.
Which is like the first human thing we've seen him do, really. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like he has like, you know, like every other conversation we see him in, he's either being placid and not trying to ruffle any feathers, or he's like drawing someone in to invest with him. Like that great Leon conversation.
His introduction, he talks about buying the hotel and his reasons why. That's a pretty like human look into him. Yeah.
It's also the most like wealthy person thing of all time to be like, well, if no one else is going to preserve it, I will, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, to be rich. And yeah, Olivia kind of works through, I guess, what you would call a... I don't know that she... We might call it a judgment, something. Olivia is sort of observing Vincent, and judging Vincent toward the end of this, and there's a kind of, I don't know how there's a reflexivity that Mandel is bringing to this where Olivia looks at Vincent and sees someone who she finds like morally insufficient because she doesn't have access to the same interiority of Vincent that we do, right? Like there's a kind of, I think this is like largely Mandel's thesis on humanity in general, which is like from Vincent's position, we empathize with Vincent and we understand the kind of pragmatic position she's in with this relationship. But then from Olivia's perspective, she just sees like the, you know, the trophy wife who's spoiled and like, you know, is shallow or whatever. There's like a kind of, there's an interesting something happening there. I'm not quite sure what.
I completely forget about what's the circumstances of their interaction.
3 months before Jonathan Alcaides was arrested, he invited her along on a trip on his yacht. This was September of 2008. They were sailing from New York to Charleston. It was her first time meeting Jonathan's second wife, Vincent, who turned out to be an elegant and friendly person with a talent for mixing cocktails. She's delightful, Olivia said to Jonathan when they were alone on the deck after dinner. Vincent had gone in to make drinks. The sunset was fading. Blah, 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 blah. Olivia wasn't sure what to say to this, so she only nodded, and for a moment they just listened to the waves and engines. They were passing alongside a quiet part of North Carolina, only a few scattered lights on the shore. Blah, blah, blah. She herself had only ever been good at one thing, and possibly not even that. Few sailors had followed Lucas with shadows. No one seemed interested in any of the work she'd done after the 50s, and the truth was that she hadn't painted in a long time. Painting was something that had grabbed hold of her for a while, decades, but now it had let her go and she had no further interest in it, or it had no further interest in her. All things end, she told herself, it was always going to be a last painting. But if she wasn't a painter, what was she? And then they kind of keep going, and although she couldn't actually think of anything less interesting than a chameleon. Vincent was lovely, but not, Olivia had decided, a serious person. Since her late teens, she'd been mentally dividing people into categories. Either you're a serious person, she'd long ago decided, or you're not. The difficulty of her current life was that she was no longer sure which category she fell into. Vincent was returning now with another round of cocktails. The lights of the Carolinas slipped past on the shore. And that's actually where the reading for today ends.
Okay, yeah. So because Olivia like is sort of like reflecting on the fact about how like she doesn't have the same aura of a young femme fatale that she once had and that she could use to sort of like, you know, get her way and manipulate the world and stuff like that. And so I think perhaps like the subtext there is like there's a bit of jealousy, right? That, you know, she's like, oh, this, you know, she basically in a sense succeeded in what I always tried to do, which was like, you know, use my you know, basically like not literally seduce, but like, you know, seduce in a more figurative sense, like the world or someone in particular, and you know, set me up for life and have it lead a, you know, luxurious life kind of thing. Yeah
Totally. Like this is like the ultimate success of what she was trying to do with Lucas, right? Where she there's a great moment where when she invites Lucas over to do the portrait, she deliberately makes sure that her friend is like in the middle of like posing nude when he comes in, just to see his reaction, just to like prove that she has power over him, you know?
Yeah. Was Lucas wasn't like rich or anything, was he? No. Okay.
No, they're just normal. Raising his brother, Jonathan, as well, it seems.
So there was something in that made me realize that there is a really constant theme of failed artists, and then to a lesser extent of just failed businessmen. You've got Olivia, who was like painting for years and was like okay, but was not great at it, and only sold one painting for anything extravagant, and it was the dude's brother who bought it. Well, I guess no, it was someone else who bought it. So okay, credit for one painting, right? Same thing with Paul. Like he was trying to write music forever until he like hit on the one thing. So failed artist for a good long time. If Lucas failed artist for maybe his entire life. I don't know if anything ever took off that he did. Vincent, if you consider the video she was shooting to be art, and she never did anything with the art, although maybe her making the art was the point of the art. But anyway, maybe she could be considered a failed artist as well. And then like the failing businesses, Leon later on in the book, Al-Qaeda and everyone there, we talked about how the hotel was a failing business. It's just like this constant theme throughout the whole book.
Lucas is the ultimate like failed artist. Like his last attempt at like trying to have his art be successful was like a really like dreary, cold like art showcase with with shit wine and people coming up to him and saying how they didn't like his painting. And then he died like a week later. It's like, fuck, dude, it's tragic.
Pretty dire, yeah. He's giving Andy Warhol, but like, what if no one bought into his bullshit? Yeah, it's pretty depressing. But yeah, I mean, like that, Darth is right. Like, there's a big question here about like the meaning of life, I think, ultimately, which is like, like this is what Olivia is touching on, which is like, if she's a painter, and like to be a painter is to be an artist, and she doesn't paint anymore, what does that make her? And I think that like, if you're a creative person, you'll probably understand this immediately, which is like, parts of yourself you tie into identifying with the things you make and the art that you do. And there are periods in your life where you maybe don't do that art as much, you don't do that art at all, but you still think of yourself as being that type of artist or being that type of person. But for a character like Olivia, it's been a really long time. Like, it's been more than most of her life that she hasn't been painting. So in totality, does that mean she's not a painter anymore? And these are like deep, big existential questions that we artists have to satisfy in order to, you know, deal with being alive. And I think that, you know, questions like this are part of why so many creative people you know, in their Wikipedia page, it's like, here's all the stuff they did, and then here's all the drugs they did to cope with it. You know, it's a difficult thing to have to experience, which is like being really cognizant of your existence and how you identify with that existence and the friction that produces, you know? Yeah, it's hard out of here. It's
and mediating yourself through like this, you know, ultimately arbitrary idea that like producing like popular art is like, I don't know, the goal ultimately. Like that's how you succeed in life is by, you know, getting fame and acclamation and stuff like that. Yeah.
right. And having to mediate when that doesn't happen, what does that mean?
But like ultimately you're playing by like kind of random rules, and like it's hard to like square general like a sense of, you know, existential ennui with you know like external validation essentially. Yeah,
and you have to do this double think where you have to convince yourself that being popular and successful is never the point of it, even though if you could be popular and successful tomorrow, you would absolutely do that. Like it's this sort of you have to reframe what success means for your creative work in order to like live with that as a fact. Me and Eric have been writing about this in our current letter series a little bit. And it's like a thing that every artist has to deal with at some point. You know, if you're not a Alan Moore or like a Vince Gilligan or like, you know, a Tony Gilroy, you have to deal with the fact that like that just isn't gonna happen for you, and you gotta keep trying to make art anyway, you know.
And it may be that is the point of Annika, because Xavier was painting her as one of these artistic failures, because in his mind she is not famous and not wealthy and therefore is an artistic failure, but she is currently touring with a band, ostensibly doing the art she wants to do with her own creative license that she chose, and assumedly happy with that choice because that's she threw away all of the wealth and fame and fortune, you know. So it's interesting to think about, like, the book is about these failed artists and failed businessmen, and then you've got Annika, who is doing the opposite, but it doesn't really focus on her. Like, there's a success story in here, but it's kind of buried.
Actually hadn't thought about that.
That's true.
Yeah, that's pretty cool actually. Same with Paul, where it's like Paul is like low key, and we'll get to this in the next part that we read for next episode, but like Paul kind of figures his life out at some point, mostly. Sort of.
Yeah, I want to argue him though. That's why I didn't bring him up specifically, because he is successful, but he's not happy about it.
Well, because he doesn't get it.
He is not fulfilled.
Yeah, because he knows part of it is
the art doesn't
artifice.
fulfill him.
Yeah, because it's not really his art. There's a bit that's we'll get to it. That's a whole fucking other conversation. Yeah, but no, I think that there's two things that I want to kind of quickly touch on. Just at the end here, which is there's something we haven't said yet, which is that there is a Olivia later on in the story. We don't know this when we're meeting her now, but later on in the story, she, like, chronologically, she knows that Jonathan is like scamming all these people. And Jonathan kind of like preemptively warns Vincent about this journalist that Olivia has told all this information about. Which is kind of interesting. So there's like this little plot thread that gets planted earlier on in the story, which is like there's someone out there who thinks that, like, has it out for Jonathan, that he preemptively even tells Vincent, like, hey, if you come across this woman, like, just ignore her, she's full of shit or whatever. So there's that. And there's also this question of, for Vincent and Jonathan, how to what extent she's involved in his corporate life is also super interesting at this point. So far in this story, she's been to like one work event, I think. And it's really clear that there's like, yeah, But it's clear that like there's a separation between these two parts of this company, where it's like there's one group that are like really insular, and then like the rest of the business. That's just something that is like painted in the background here as like a contextual detail, that like there's sort of some inner circle of this business.
Right, and that's why it's important that she has this like poise and decorum about her,
Right.
because it's sort of more about personalities than it is about business.
Seems like it, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's just the world of the rich, though, and not
Yeah,
necessarily
exactly, yeah.
related to any, scams or anything.
Oh yeah, that too, right? Like that's like it's all about appearance and facade and all the bad stuff that comes with money.
The difference between millionaires and billionaires.
Yeah. Well, and that's always the thing, isn't it? It's like the willingness to be real is seen as like a threat or something, or that it's like there's the type of wealthy person who views like being real as like naive almost. Just ironic because it's the opposite, but whatever. Yeah, that's kind of where we leave off this reading is Olivia kind of having met Vincent and thinking not very much of her at all. And as you say, Pat, maybe a bit of jealousy there. Yeah, that's everything I've got. Do you guys have anything else that you want to touch on before we wrap up?
Nope.
It's interesting on the read through. You meet Kaspersky, the journalist or whoever. Like you see her briefly in the hotel earlier on, and like it mentions specifically, like Al Qaeda does not want to be anywhere around her. And you get that like way early before anything makes sense at all.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, you kind of don't think anything of it because it just sort of seems incidental. Which is something that Mandel is really, really, really good at doing, is being like, here's a thing that feels random. And you go, that felt random. And then you read the book again and you go, oh, if only I'd known.
Yeah. Because like that was the first scene that like introduces her, and then like later on, and a couple chapters later, is when Al Qaeda tells Vincent, "Hey, if you ever meet this woman, Kaspersky or whatever, like she's after me." And now I was like, oh, we just had that section earlier in the book, and then later it goes back to that section again, because I'm pretty sure that's when she meets Paul.
Yes, correct.
So the introduction that makes zero sense is the follow-up for multiple things going forward.
Yeah, she's really clever like that, where she'll like focalize one incident and then like keep recontextualizing it to keep adding different meaning. And it's part of what
Very Station 11.
Yeah, like, and I'm just like obsessed with it as like a method of like telling a story, because it does the thing that real life sometimes does, where something happens and you think it's one thing, and then later on you learn more information, and it becomes like, okay, well now I kind of understand more of this, and it's this other thing. And then even later on, you learn even more, and you go, oh, there's actually these 5 other things as well that I didn't understand was happening. And that's just like, that's how reality works. And I think that these books are such a canny distillation of what it is like to live as a person who makes art, and like having to grapple with your conception of the world constantly shifting. I think that Mandel, out of most writers I've read in my entire life, has a particular knack for communicating that and showing that structurally, not just in the dialogue, which is very, very rare.
David, I want. Can you like speak to? And this isn't a value judgment. I don't think it's like good or bad. It just is what it is. But it's very like non-sexual, like this book, and Station 11. Like, is that the case with all Mandel's work? Like, it's just interesting because it is like, as you say, like it's about the nitty gritty of life, and it's about like all these complicated human feelings. But yeah, like it's nothing really like prurient in there at all.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting aspect and quality of these three novels in particular. Her earlier works, while she's never graphic in any particular way, they have the sex is more of a feature. Um, I think that Mandel is more interested in, because you're right, like there is sex in this book a couple of times where Vincent and Jonathan will have an exchange, and then there'll be the implication that he takes her dress off, or that they have sex. But I think that for Mandel, the focus and the detail of sex is only relevant where that sex has a meaning. She only paints detail around romance and sex where it matters to a character. Like, for example, when you first have Paul meet Annika, he doesn't like linger over any particular detail. It's very simple that he thinks she's beautiful and that he wants to ask her out, and that she knows that she's beautiful. There's no lingering detail over like what she's wearing or her neckline or anything like that. It's just like a fact. I think where Mandel's work evolves from is the central place of, she kind of treats sex like it's an everyday part of life until it isn't, and when it isn't, it becomes exceptional, and that's when it's worth detailing. Because yeah, it is interesting. I hadn't really picked up on that as a theme or a thing that's in her work, but yeah, certainly in Station 11, I don't think there's any sex. Thinking through the book in my head.
I mean, there's a whole wing full of pregnant women,
Yeah,
but
but
I still agree with you.
Yeah,
I still agree with you.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
But it's on my mind because I think it is. I don't know. I think there's something going on with Vincent where, because I can't imagine that the sex between her and Alcitus is mutual, like as in like from the like that scene where he's like, oh yeah, and then he unzips her dress. I can't imagine that he's putting in much effort to please her. Maybe he is, I don't know, but like it just makes me think perhaps that's some other quality of Vincent's character, that like she's maybe not that much of a sexual person, which I don't know, I think could be an interesting embellishment.
She specifically says at some point that she does not mind sleeping with him, and like
yeah, exactly,
the reason
like,
that she
that's very specific wording.
Yeah, which like that's neither good nor bad,
Yeah, and like it's like not, I don't know, it just doesn't take up much mental space for her, which is an interesting characterization, I think.
But I would have the same reaction that David did, is that none of that plays into the story in a important enough way, because there's like later on, after everything breaks bad and she sleeps with, I don't remember what his name is, and like it's half a sentence, it's not the point.
Yeah, and I think especially to foreground like some thoughts we'll have next time, where she ends up is a place where like sex matters to her in that it's meaningful, right? Like, and yeah, I also think that there's a salient quality of these young women seem to be aware of their own beauty and the way that the sex, like that they can either be in control of their sexualization or they can be sexualized, right? Like you get that with Annika, and you get that obviously with Vincent to a large extent, and of course with Olivia as well. I think Mandel's also working through this question of third wave feminism, which is it feminist to enjoy sex and to enjoy being sexual, or is it feminist to not do that? And where like and how do you unpack that that as an idea, and I think that these three women working through this is Mandel working through it herself as well.
Well, yeah, that's ultimately what I was thinking, is that it is a very like sort of female gaze book, because I'm used to reading like male authors, and they're not necessarily like salacious unless it's George R. R. Martin. That guy's a fucking perv. But like like a book will at least have a bit more salaciousness to it, and these books are very, very sterile in that regard. Which again, like not good or bad, just something I noticed, and I think it's probably a reflection of the author. Not to speculate about Emily St. John's sex life. I don't think that's appropriate, but I think with everything, it's a reflection of the author.
Yeah, I mean, again, not to speculate, but to give you some like biographical detail. After this book comes out, she divorces her husband and ends up in a relationship with a woman. So I think that she's probably at the time thinking through what sex means in her life, and I think those are like pertinent questions to these three books. And the place of sex in life is certainly a pervasive question in her works before this as well, is what I would say. So you picked up on like a theme I hadn't actually thought about that is kind of all over what she's doing in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Question. Could we make the argument that the book is specifically avoiding looking at physical pleasures, and is it incredibly focused on maybe emotional stability or emotional pleasures, something like that? Because like there should be way more about like she's eating the best like filet mignon every night. It doesn't talk about like the quality of food that she would have now, or like getting amazing massages from the Swedish, there's so much that they could talk about. They talk about like dresses, but not in a fashion of like the material feels wonderful. And and same thing it's like there's no physical pleasures that the book really talks about. It's all something else.
Yeah, I think that was on my mind as well. Like everything is so heavy, and that there's no, I don't know, there's like little kind of joy in this, as in, obviously the book's enjoyable to read, but there's like little like sensory, like sort of description, and it's all just about like sonder and heavy feelings, and yeah. And
I want to say most of the, like when they're talking about physical stuff, for the most part, it's like these drugs were awesome and they ruined my life. It's like kind of like negative.
Yeah, I think the one exception is it's one of the afternoons where Morella and Vincent are shopping, and they get caught in the rain, and this is how Vincent narrates it. And they walked faster, too late. The first thunderclap sounded, and the downpour began. Morella took her hand, and they broke into a run. Vincent was laughing. She loved being caught in the rain. And Morella didn't like what rain did to her hair, but by the time they reached the corner, she was smiling too. She pulled Vincent into an espresso bar, and they stood inside for just a moment, pleasantly chilled by the air conditioning, pushing wet hair away from their eyes and surveying the damage to the shopping bags. Morella's bodyguard came in a moment later, mopping his forehead with a handkerchief. And then a couple pages later, it goes, they'd fallen into a companionable silence, and as they watched the downpour, Vincent realized that she felt perfectly at ease for the first time in recent memory. The truth was that in the kingdom of money, before she'd met Morella, she'd been extremely lonely, or extremely alone. And then she says, do you find that shopping is actually incredibly boring? Vincent felt guilty saying this aloud. It was only possible to say because Morella hadn't come from money either. Ghosts of Vincent's earlier selves flocked around the table and stared at the beautiful clothes she was wearing. I know it's in poor taste to admit it, Morella said, but it's incredible how quickly the novelty wears off. And it's the first time that like she has like a moment of like sensory pleasure and enjoyment, and like just this single moment of peace and joy. It's the only time. And I think it's telling, again, they get caught in the rain. It's water related. It's all here for there's an essay here if you want to write it, is what I'm saying,
But I read both of those as being entirely emotional reactions and not physical ones. Like, yes, they're literally caught in the rain, and it says pushing her hair, her wet hair back or whatever, but the scene is about the emotion that she's experiencing of being out in the rain. It's not like, it doesn't talk about like the physical sensation she got of like the water on her skin or anything like that. It's like the book is, and the same thing with the next bit. It's when she's talking about the dresses, it's more like she's comparing the emotion that she used to have of being without to the emotion of being now that she has all of these things. It's not like she's saying, oh, this this silk feels so great. That's what I'm focused on. It's like the book is just avoiding those physical aspects.
Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's like a really deliberate choice. Like, I think that's like I just genuinely don't think that Mandel is particularly interested in writing about what Pat was alluding to before, which is like the kind of carnal side of humanity. I think she's just like deeply uninterested in.
Yeah, it helps to move the pace of the book along too. Like, which is I'm all about.
Yeah, the efficiency that she gets from this choice is nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's able to like dagger through some stuff that would take a normal author like a ton of time to like put onto the page, which is, all of her books are a bit like this, where you just kind of whip through it and then you go, what? How's it over? It's definitely a quality of Mandel's that I think is, I think that for some people, it can feel like it can feel like nothing's really real and that nothing really has an impact. Which is a criticism I see sometimes. Or that people go like, yeah, it's a pretty enough book, but like, I don't know, I never quite was immersed in it. Which I think is like a, again, perfectly valid criticism, but, not an issue that I have necessarily.
The taste thing.
Yeah, your mileage is going to vary. Cool. Good stuff. I guess, yeah, let's leave it there unless that provoked any final thoughts?
The only final thought I had, and I've been trying to decide for this entire session if I should make this a joke or an actual thought. But there's the theme of escaping from the hotel and then remembering the damage that they experienced there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes. Correct, Darth. This sort of, the next chapter, to foreground how part 2 starts, the next chapter is called The Counterlife, right? This is a book that is going like, hey, this is how parallelism works. So yeah, I think that's like 100% right. You even have characters at multiple points say stuff that sounds like, I remember damage, it's all here. So it's funny and also true, Yeah, so I'm with you. Yeah, if you're gonna go away and work on an actual joke, like do so, come back next time and be like, I figured it out, guys. This is the structure of the joke. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well with that, I think let's leave it there. Darth, pluggables. This will go out in about a week. What do you want to point people toward?
YouTube, DARTH', and a new video should be up tomorrow, which will be looking at kind of the timeline on comparing the Empire and the First Order, and the timeline in which they ruled and in which they fell, and how quote-unquote realistic that actually was.
I'm very excited. Based on our group chat, I'm very, very keen to see where that one landed. Yeah, go check it out. Links, as always, in the show notes. Patrick, what do you got going? Where can people find you on the internet?
People can find me on YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts. We have a website, amttm.com. All episodes and socials are there. Method to the Madness is what our podcast is called. Look us up on YouTube. And we do a lot of Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul stuff. Yeah. Speaking of which, the Vince Gilligan's new show is coming out. Oh wait, no, it came out.
It
Would have come out yesterday.
Yeah, I watched the first episode.
Oh my goodness.
It's real good.
Oh my.
I sent a message in one of my writing group chats that was like, I finished the first episode, and I was left with the feeling of, imagine being this good at writing that your first episode ends in such a way that makes you go, how is this a TV show? Like, what do you do next? It's incredible. It like truly, I have absolutely no idea what the show is going to be. Like, that's how good that first episode is. So
excited.
The first two are out. Go watch them. Yeah. Excellent. Well, I think that's everything. If you'd like to support us, you can head to patreon.com/zeroindent. Supporting us at the $5 tier unlocks the bonus episodes of this show, where we watch and talk about supplementary materials. The episode that me and Patrick did on Hollow Knight and other stuff, we kind of, we meandered through capitalism and the kind of postmodern context that we live in.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, it was. I think we've both been experiencing some fairly significant existential ennui lately, so it was a nice opportunity to talk through some of that stuff. I think so. Go check that out. And free Patreon subscribers gain access to the Zero Indent Patreon chat, where you can send us questions and ideas for future episodes directly. Any support you can give helps us keep making thoughtful, independent media criticism, an important thing to preserve in an age where context is defined by algorithms. We appreciate all of our Patreon subscribers who help us continue to make the shows and articles that shape Zero Indent. Join us next time to talk about the rest of Glass Hotel. We're reading from part 2 right to the end. So if you are reading along, we are reading to the end of the book. And with that, we find ourselves at the end of another episode of the Zero Indent Review. And as always, it's just the end of the show. It's not the end of the world. Zero Indent is an independent publication dedicated to studying works of genre fiction, brought to you by our subscribers. Head to patreon.com/zeroindent to learn more and consider supporting us. Our theme song is The Swan by Alon Peretz. Our podcast cover art is by Crystal Hatay. Everything else is written, directed, and edited by me, DC McNeil. You can find our merch and books at underink.press and everything we do at zeroindent.com.